History is not merely a record of events, it is a mirror reflecting humanity's deepest struggles, triumphs, and aspirations. The story of King Langdarma and the assassination that ended his reign is one such tale, a narrative rich with drama, philosophy, and profound implications for both Tibetan history and the broader human experience. But why does this story matter? What lessons does it hold for us today? Imagine a world where belief systems clash, where tradition grapples with innovation, and where power wields its double-edged sword. In the case of Tibet during the 9th century, these tensions reached a boiling point under the rule of King Langdarma. His persecution of Buddhism was not just an act of religious oppression but a seismic shift in the cultural and political landscape of the region. Yet, within this turmoil lay seeds of resilience, courage, and transformation. How do we reconcile the paradox of destruction giving rise to renewal? And what can we learn about the enduring nature of faith when faced with adversity? To fully grasp the significance of this pivotal moment, we must journey back in time, to the origins of Buddhism in Tibet, the rise of its golden age, and the eventual conflict that threatened to extinguish its light. Along the way, we will explore the motivations behind Langdarma's actions, the resistance led by figures like Lalung Pelgyi Dorje, and the long-term impact on Tibetan society. But more than that, we will delve into the philosophical underpinnings of this saga, asking timeless questions about identity, freedom, and the human spirit. Are you ready to embark on this odyssey through time and thought? Let us begin. Part 1: The Rise of Buddhism in Tibet. Early introduction of Buddhism. Buddhism did not arrive in Tibet as a conqueror but rather as a gentle emissary, carried by winds of diplomacy and cultural exchange. Its introduction during the reign of King Songtsen Gampo, 617 to 650 CE, marked the beginning of a spiritual revolution, one that would forever alter the fabric of Tibetan society. But why did Songtsen Gampo choose to embrace this foreign religion? Was it purely strategic, or was there something deeper at play? Songtsen Gampo is often hailed as the unifier of the Tibetan plateau, a visionary leader who transformed a fragmented land into a centralized monarchy. Yet, his decision to adopt Buddhism went beyond mere politics. By marrying Princess Birkudi of Nepal and Princess Wencheng of China, both devout Buddhists, he forged alliances that brought not only military strength but also spiritual enlightenment. These unions were not just marriages of convenience, they were symbolic mergers of cultures, ideas, and values. Can you envision the grandeur of those ceremonies, where two worlds came together under the banner of shared beliefs? Under Songtsen Gampo's patronage, Buddhism began to take root in Tibet. He commissioned the construction of sacred sites, most notably the Jokhang Temple in Lhasa, which remains one of the holiest shrines in Tibetan Buddhism to this day. Imagine the dedication required to build such a monument in a land dominated by rugged mountains and harsh climates. It was not merely architecture, it was a declaration of intent, a statement that Buddhism had found a new home. However, the early adoption of Buddhism was not without its challenges. Indigenous traditions, particularly Bon, viewed this newcomer with suspicion and hostility. Bon, which had been the dominant spiritual system in Tibet for centuries, saw Buddhism as a threat to its very existence. Who could blame them? When a foreign idea enters your world, promising salvation yet demanding change, wouldn't you hesitate? The tension between Bon and Buddhism was not just religious, it was cultural, social, and even existential. How does one preserve identity while embracing evolution? Despite this opposition, Buddhism gradually gained traction, especially under the patronage of later rulers. Why did it succeed where others might have failed? Perhaps because it offered something universal, a path to inner peace, wisdom, and liberation. Isn't it fascinating how ideas spread not by force but by resonance? As Buddhism took hold, it began to shape every aspect of Tibetan life, from governance to art, education to ethics. It became more than a religion, it became a way of being. The Golden Age of Tibetan Buddhism. If Songtsen Gampo laid the foundation, then King Trisong Detsen, 742 to 797 CE, built the edifice. His reign marked the true flourishing of Buddhism in Tibet, a period often referred to as its Golden Age. But what made this era so transformative? Was it the king's vision, the contributions of scholars, or the collective yearning of a people seeking meaning? Trisong Detsen invited some of the greatest minds of Indian Buddhism to Tibet, including Tarikita and Padmasambhava. These luminaries were not just teachers, they were architects of a spiritual renaissance. Tarikita, a philosopher and monk, introduced systematic teachings on logic, metaphysics, and ethics. Padmasambhava, often called Guru Rinpoche, became a legendary figure who subdued local spirits and integrated Bon practices into Buddhism, creating a uniquely Tibetan form of the religion. Can you imagine the intellectual ferment of those days, where debates raged and insights blossomed? One of the crowning achievements of this period was the founding of Sami Monastery, the first Buddhist monastery in Tibet. Built in the shape of a mandala, it symbolized the harmony between the cosmos and the human soul. Within its walls, monks studied scriptures, practiced meditation, and engaged in philosophical discourse. It was not just a place of worship, it was a crucible of learning and creativity. Doesn't it make you wonder how environments shape our growth? By the late 8th century, Buddhism had become deeply entrenched in Tibetan society. Monasteries served as centers of education, producing scholars, artists, and leaders. They were hubs of innovation, where science, medicine, and philosophy intersected. Yet, this golden age was not without its shadows. Political instability, economic pressures, and the lingering influence of Bon posed constant threats. How does one sustain progress amidst uncertainty? Perhaps the answer lies in adaptability, the ability to bend without breaking. Part 2, King Langdarma and the Persecution of Buddhism. The reign of King Langdarma. When Langdarma ascended the throne around 838 CE, he inherited a kingdom shaped by centuries of Buddhist influence. His brother, Ralpakan, had been a staunch supporter of the religion, continuing the policies of their predecessors by promoting monasticism and sponsoring translations of Buddhist texts. So why did Langdarma take such a drastically different path? Was it personal conviction, political necessity, or something else entirely? Historical accounts suggest several possible reasons for Langdarma's animosity toward Buddhism. Some historians argue that he sought to consolidate power by undermining the influence of the Buddhist clergy, who had grown wealthy and politically powerful over the decades. Others point to economic concerns, noting that monasteries controlled vast tracts of land and resources, potentially straining the kingdom's finances. Still, others emphasize cultural resistance, highlighting the persistent opposition from Bon adherents who saw Buddhism as a threat to their identity. But perhaps the truth is more nuanced. Could it be that Langdarma's actions stemmed from a combination of these factors, intertwined with his own worldview and ambitions? After all, leaders are shaped by their times as much as they shape them. What drives a ruler to suppress a belief system that has brought so much richness to his land? Is it fear of losing control, or a genuine belief that change is necessary? The campaign against Buddhism. Langdarma's persecution of Buddhism was relentless and devastating. Monasteries were forcibly closed or destroyed, disrupting the institutional framework that had supported the religion for generations. Monks were compelled to abandon their vows and return to lay life, while some were even forced to convert to Bon. Sacred texts were targeted for destruction, and efforts to translate new scriptures were halted. It was as if Langdarma sought to erase Buddhism from the collective memory of Tibet. Yet, history teaches us that oppression rarely achieves its intended goals. Instead, it often galvanizes resistance, igniting flames of defiance that refuse to be extinguished. How did the Buddhist community respond to this crisis? Did they succumb to despair, or did they find ways to preserve their faith? The answer lies in their extraordinary resilience, a testament to the enduring power of belief. The psychological impact of persecution. To truly understand the magnitude of Langdarma's campaign against Buddhism, we must delve into its psychological impact on the Tibetan people. Imagine being part of a community whose very identity is rooted in spiritual practice, only to have that foundation systematically dismantled. Monks, who had dedicated their lives to meditation, study, and service, were suddenly stripped of their roles. Temples, once vibrant centers of worship and learning, fell silent. The air of sanctity was replaced by an oppressive void. What happens to the human spirit when its source of meaning is attacked? Do individuals crumble under the weight of despair, or do they find new ways to persevere? For many Buddhists in Tibet, the persecution became a crucible, a test of faith and resilience. It forced them to confront existential questions. What does it mean to be a Buddhist when you cannot openly practice your beliefs? Can spirituality survive without institutions? This period of suppression also revealed the dual nature of power. On one hand, Langdarma wielded authority with an iron fist, seeking to impose his will on a reluctant populace. On the other hand, he inadvertently highlighted the limitations of coercion. No matter how severe the crackdown, no ruler can extinguish the inner light of conviction. Isn't it ironic that attempts to destroy often lead to preservation? The harder Langdarma pushed, the deeper the roots of resistance grew. The role of Bon in Langdarma's policies. While Langdarma's motivations remained debated, one undeniable factor was the influence of Bon, the indigenous spiritual tradition of Tibet. Bon practitioners viewed Buddhism as a foreign import that threatened their cultural heritage. To them, Langdarma's actions may have seemed like a restoration, a return to authenticity. But was this perception accurate? Bon itself was far from monolithic. It encompassed a wide array of practices, beliefs, and rituals. Some adherents embraced syncretism, integrating elements of Buddhism into their worldview. Others resisted any form of compromise, seeing coexistence as capitulation. In this context, Langdarma's policies could be interpreted as an attempt to appease traditionalists within his kingdom. Yet, such appeasement came at a cost: the alienation of those who had embraced Buddhism wholeheartedly. Here lies another layer of complexity, the tension between preserving cultural identity and embracing change. How do societies navigate this delicate balance? Is it possible to honor the past while forging ahead into the future? These are questions that resonate across time and geography, reminding us that history is never black and white but rather a tapestry of competing narratives. The limits of suppression. Despite Langdarma's efforts, the persecution of Buddhism ultimately proved unsustainable. Why? Because belief systems are not merely external structures, they are internalized truths that shape how individuals see themselves and the world around them. Even as temples crumbled and scriptures burned, the teachings of Buddhism lived on in the hearts and minds of its followers. Moreover, Langdarma's campaign created unintended consequences. By targeting monasteries, he disrupted not only religious life but also education, healthcare, and social welfare, services traditionally provided by Buddhist institutions. This left a vacuum that neither Bon nor the state could fully fill. Could it be argued that Langdarma's actions weakened his own rule by undermining the very fabric of society? In hindsight, his reign serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of overreach. Power unchecked by wisdom often leads to self-destruction. As we reflect on this chapter of history, we might ask ourselves, what lessons can modern leaders draw from Langdarma's mistakes? How do we avoid repeating cycles of oppression and resistance? Part 3: Resistance and the Assassination of Langdarma. Secret preservation of Buddhism. Even in the darkest hours, hope finds a way to shine through. During Langdarma's reign, Buddhist monks devised ingenious methods to preserve their faith. They practiced in secret, hiding in remote caves or traveling incognito to avoid detection. Oral transmission became a lifeline, with teachers passing down sacred teachings word by word, ensuring that knowledge would not be lost. One particularly fascinating aspect of this resistance was the practice of terma, hidden treasures. Important texts were concealed in caves, mountainsides, or other secure locations, awaiting rediscovery in safer times. This concept of treasure revelation reflects a profound trust in the cyclical nature of history. Just as winter gives way to spring, so too would persecution give way to renewal. Doesn't this idea offer solace in our own struggles? That even when circumstances seem dire, there is always the possibility of rebirth. But what drove these monks to risk everything for their faith? Was it duty, devotion, or something deeper? Perhaps it was the understanding that spirituality is not just a personal pursuit but a collective responsibility. By safeguarding their traditions, they were preserving a legacy for future generations, a gift that transcends individual lifetimes. The role of Lolong Pelgi Dorje. Among those who resisted Langdarma's persecution, few figures loom larger than Lolong Pelgi Dorje. His story is not just one of bravery but of ingenuity and sacrifice. According to legend, Lolong disguised himself as a wandering performer, complete with black robes and a white mask, to evade suspicion. He approached the king during a ceremonial bow, seized the moment, and fired a single arrow that ended Langdarma's life. This act of defiance has taken on mythological proportions in Tibetan culture. It symbolizes the triumph of righteousness over tyranny, of courage over fear. But let us pause for a moment and consider the weight of such an action. What must it have felt like to stand before a ruler, knowing that your next move could alter the course of history? Did Lolong hesitate, or was he guided by an unshakable sense of purpose? After the assassination, Lolong mounted a black horse and fled into the wilderness. The horse's dark color blended seamlessly with the night, allowing him to escape undetected. This detail adds a poetic dimension to the story, evoking themes of concealment and revelation. Darkness, often associated with danger, becomes a shield for justice. Light, though obscured temporarily, eventually breaks through. Symbolic significance of the assassination. The assassination of Langdarma is more than a historical event, it is a parable of transformation. By eliminating the king, Lolong effectively ended the systematic persecution of Buddhism and paved the way for its resurgence. But beyond its immediate impact, the act carries symbolic weight. It reminds us that change often requires boldness, and sometimes, radical action. In modern times, the story continues to inspire Tibetans in their struggle to preserve cultural and religious heritage. Whether facing political oppression or global cultural homogenization, the narrative underscores the importance of standing firm in one's convictions. It challenges us to ask, what am I willing to fight for? What values define me, and how far am I prepared to go to protect them? Part 4, The Aftermath and Long-Term Impact. Immediate consequences. The death of Langdarma plunged Tibet into chaos. Without a strong central authority, the empire fragmented into smaller regional polities. This period, known as the Era of Fragmentation, lasted for nearly 2 centuries. While it marked the end of the Yarlung dynasty, it also created space for innovation and adaptation. During this time, Buddhism slowly began to re-emerge, thanks in large part to the efforts of surviving monks and the rediscovery of hidden texts. Imagine the joy of uncovering a long-lost scripture, its pages bearing the wisdom of ancestors. Each discovery was a reminder that knowledge, once preserved, can never truly be erased. Cultural and religious revival. By the 10th and 11th centuries, Buddhism experienced a remarkable revival in Tibet. Key figures like Atissa, 982 to 1054 CE, and Marpa Lotsawa, 1012 to 1097 CE, played instrumental roles in revitalizing the religion. New schools of Tibetan Buddhism emerged, each contributing unique interpretations and practices. This diversity enriched the tradition, making it more resilient and adaptable. Philosophical reflections. The aftermath of Langdarma's assassination invites us to ponder broader questions about continuity and change. How do societies rebuild after collapse? What role does memory play in shaping identity? And how do we honor the past while embracing the future? These are timeless inquiries that speak to the heart of the human condition. The era of fragmentation, chaos and opportunity. The assassination of Langdarma did not merely end a reign, it shattered the political unity that had defined Tibet for centuries. The Yarlung dynasty, which had brought stability and centralized governance to the region, dissolved into a patchwork of smaller polities. This period, known as the Era of Fragmentation, circa 842-10th century, was marked by decentralization, regionalism, and frequent power struggles. Yet, within this chaos lay opportunities for reinvention. Imagine a canvas wiped clean, ready for new strokes of color. Without the constraints of a rigid central authority, local leaders and communities began to experiment with governance, religion, and culture. Monasteries, though weakened by Langdarma's persecution, gradually regained influence. They became not only centers of spiritual practice but also hubs of education, art, and diplomacy. In many ways, the fragmentation allowed Buddhism to adapt and evolve, taking on regional flavors while retaining its core teachings. But what does fragmentation teach us about human societies? Is it always a sign of decline, or can it be a catalyst for growth? History shows us that periods of disintegration often precede renaissance. Just as a forest regenerates after a fire, so too did Tibet emerge stronger from the ashes of its fractured empire. Isn't it remarkable how destruction can sow the seeds of renewal? Rediscovery of hidden treasures, Terma. One of the most fascinating aspects of the post-Langdarma era was the rediscovery of Terma, hidden treasures. These texts, concealed during the persecution, were said to contain profound teachings meant to guide future generations. According to tradition, certain individuals known as Tertans, treasure revealers, possessed the karmic connection necessary to uncover these sacred relics. The concept of Terma is deeply symbolic. It speaks to the idea that wisdom, once preserved, cannot be lost forever. Even in the darkest times, there are reservoirs of knowledge waiting to be tapped. Consider the metaphorical implications. What treasures do we carry within ourselves, hidden beneath layers of doubt or fear? And how might we access them when the world seems bleak? For Tibetans, the rediscovery of Terma was not just a religious phenomenon but a cultural reawakening. Each unearthed text reinforced the continuity of their heritage, bridging the gap between past and present. It was as if the voices of ancestors whispered through the pages, reminding their descendants of who they were, and who they could become. The role of key figures in revival. By the 10th and 11th centuries, Buddhism experienced a resurgence in Tibet, thanks in large part to visionary figures like Atissa, 982–1054 CE, and Marpa Lotsawa, 1012–1097 CE. Their contributions went beyond mere restoration, they breathed new life into the tradition, ensuring its relevance for future generations. Atissa, an Indian scholar invited to Tibet by King Langdarma, played a pivotal role in revitalizing Buddhist philosophy and ethics. His seminal work, The Lamp for the Path to Enlightenment, laid the foundation for the Lamrim tradition, a step-by-step guide to spiritual development. Atissa emphasized compassion, mindfulness, and the cultivation of bodhicitta, the altruistic intention to achieve enlightenment for the benefit of all beings. Through his teachings, he reminded Tibetans that spirituality is not an escape from the world but a way to engage with it more fully. Marpa Lotsawa, on the other hand, exemplified the spirit of cross-cultural exchange. A translator and pilgrim, he traveled to India multiple times to study under renowned masters like Naropa. Upon returning to Tibet, he founded the Kagyu school of Tibetan Buddhism, which emphasized meditation, oral transmission, and the guru-disciple relationship. Marpa's life story is a testament to the transformative power of perseverance. Despite facing numerous hardships, including financial ruin and personal loss, he remained steadfast in his pursuit of truth. Together, Atissa and Marpa represent two facets of revival: intellectual rigor and experiential depth. Their legacies remind us that renewal requires both head and heart, analysis and intuition, scholarship and practice. Emergence of new schools of thought. The post-fragmentation period saw the rise of several distinct schools of Tibetan Buddhism, each offering unique interpretations and practices. The Kagyu, Sakya, and Gelug schools emerged as major traditions, contributing to the diversity and richness of Tibetan spirituality. Kagyu, known for its emphasis on meditation and direct transmission, the Kagyu school traces its lineage back to Marpa and his disciple Milarepa. Milarepa's life story, filled with hardship and redemption, has inspired countless practitioners over the centuries. His songs of realization capture the essence of Buddhist philosophy in poetic form, making complex ideas accessible to ordinary people. Sakya, founded by Konchak Gyalpo, the Sakya school places great importance on scholarship and ritual. Its leaders, known as Sakya Trizons, have historically served as intermediaries between spiritual and temporal authorities. The Sakya tradition also emphasizes the interdependence of wisdom and method, a reminder that knowledge must be applied skillfully to benefit others. Gelug, established by Je Tsongkhapa, 1357–1419 CE, the Gelug school is perhaps best known for its monastic discipline and logical analysis. Tsongkhapa's reforms aimed to restore the purity of monastic vows and promote rigorous philosophical inquiry. The Dalai Lama lineage, which originated within the Gelug tradition, continues to play a significant role in global Buddhism today. These schools reflect the adaptability of Tibetan Buddhism, capable of addressing diverse needs while remaining rooted in shared principles. They demonstrate that unity need not come at the expense of diversity. In fact, the two often reinforce each other. Symbolic resonance of the assassination. The assassination of Langdarma has taken on mythological proportions in Tibetan culture. It symbolizes the triumph of righteousness over tyranny, of courage over fear. But beyond its immediate impact, the act carries deeper philosophical significance. It challenges us to consider the nature of justice, sacrifice, and moral responsibility. Was Lolong Pelgyi Dorje a hero or a vigilante? Did his actions stem from personal conviction or collective necessity? These questions invite us to reflect on the complexities of morality. In a world where absolutes are rare, how do we navigate gray areas? When is violence justified, if ever? And what responsibilities do we bear toward our communities? Moreover, the assassination serves as a reminder that change often requires boldness, and sometimes, radical action. It asks us to examine our own lives. Are we willing to take risks for what we believe in? Or do we settle for complacency, hoping someone else will step forward? Part 5, Modern Interpretations and Scholarly Debates. Historical accuracy versus mythologization. While the assassination of Langdarma is well documented in Tibetan sources, some historians question the exact details of the event. For instance, debates persist about the precise year of Langdarma's death and the motivations behind the assassination. Was it solely driven by religious persecution, or were internal power struggles within the royal family also at play? These uncertainties highlight the tension between history and mythology. On one hand, scholars strive for accuracy, seeking to separate fact from fiction. On the other hand, myths serve a different purpose. They encapsulate collective values, aspirations, and fears. They provide meaning where facts fall short. Consider the story of Lolong Pelgyi Dorje. Whether or not every detail is historically accurate, the tale embodies universal themes of resistance, sacrifice, and liberation. It reminds us that stories are not just records of events, they are tools for understanding ourselves and our place in the world. Contemporary relevance. In today's context, the story of Langdarma and Lolong Pelgyi Dorje resonates deeply with discussions of cultural identity and resistance. For Tibetans living under Chinese rule, it serves as a powerful symbol of defiance against external threats. It underscores the importance of preserving cultural and religious traditions in the face of homogenization and assimilation. But the narrative's relevance extends beyond Tibet. Across the globe, communities grapple with similar challenges. How do we honor our heritage while embracing change? How do we resist oppression without becoming oppressors ourselves? These are questions that transcend borders and eras, speaking to the shared human experience. Philosophical implications. At its core, the story invites us to ponder the nature of freedom. What does it mean to be free, not just politically, but spiritually and intellectually? Can true freedom exist without responsibility? And how do we balance individual rights with communal obligations? Furthermore, the tale raises questions about the cyclical nature of history. Oppression and resistance, destruction and renewal, these patterns repeat themselves across time and geography. Why do we seem destined to relive the same struggles? Is it possible to break free from these cycles, or are they intrinsic to the human condition? The role of oral tradition in shaping history. One of the most fascinating aspects of Tibetan history is the interplay between written records and oral tradition. While scholars rely on manuscripts, inscriptions, and archaeological evidence to reconstruct events, much of Tibet's past has been preserved through storytelling, songs, and rituals. This oral transmission adds a layer of complexity to our understanding of figures like Langdarma and Lalung Pelgyi Dorje. Consider the story of Lalung's assassination. It is not merely a historical account, it is a living narrative that evolves with each retelling. Each generation imbues it with new meaning, reflecting their own struggles and aspirations. For instance, during periods of political turmoil, the tale might emphasize themes of resistance and heroism. In times of cultural revival, it might highlight the resilience of faith and tradition. But what does this tell us about the nature of history? Is it a static record of facts, or a dynamic process of interpretation? Perhaps both are true. Written documents provide a foundation, but oral traditions offer nuance and depth. They remind us that history is not just about what happened, it's about how we remember and interpret those events. Debates over motivations, political versus religious factors. Scholars continue to debate the motivations behind Langdarma's persecution of Buddhism and Lalung's decision to assassinate him. Some argue that Langdarma's actions were primarily driven by political considerations. By undermining the influence of Buddhist monasteries, he sought to consolidate power and stabilize his reign. Others suggest that economic factors played a role, pointing to the vast resources controlled by religious institutions. On the other hand, proponents of the religious interpretation emphasize the lingering tension between Bon and Buddhism. From this perspective, Langdarma's campaign was an attempt to restore indigenous traditions and assert cultural sovereignty. Similarly, Lalung's assassination could be seen as a response to spiritual crisis rather than purely political necessity. These debates underscore the complexity of human behavior. Rarely are decisions motivated by a single factor. Instead, they arise from a confluence of influences. Isn't it intriguing how individuals and societies navigate competing priorities? And how do we reconcile seemingly contradictory impulses? Langdarma as a symbol of tyranny. In modern Tibetan discourse, Langdarma is often portrayed as a symbol of tyranny, a ruler who suppressed freedom and stifled progress. This portrayal serves a dual purpose. It vilifies oppression while celebrating resistance. Yet, it also raises important questions about how we construct narratives around historical figures. Was Langdarma truly a villain, or was he a product of his time? Could his actions have stemmed from genuine concerns about governance and stability? These questions challenge us to adopt a more nuanced view of history, one that acknowledges the humanity of even those we deem antagonists. Moreover, the demonization of Langdarma highlights the power of storytelling in shaping collective memory. By framing him as an oppressor, later generations reinforce the legitimacy of resistance. It reminds us that history is not just about recording events, it's about crafting identities and justifying actions. Lalung Pelgyi Dorje, hero or anti-hero? Similarly, Lalung Pelgyi Dorje occupies a complex position in Tibetan mythology. On one hand, he is celebrated as a hero who risked everything to protect his faith and community. His act of defiance embodies the ideals of courage, selflessness, and moral conviction. On the other hand, some interpretations cast him as an anti-hero, a figure whose actions, though noble in intent, involved violence and subterfuge. This duality reflects broader tensions within ethical philosophy. When is violence justified, if ever? Can the ends justify the means? And what responsibilities do we bear when taking drastic measures? Lalung's story forces us to confront these uncomfortable questions, reminding us that morality is rarely black and white. Global parallels, resistance movements across time and space. The story of Langdarma and Lalung Pelgi Dorje resonates far beyond the borders of Tibet. It echoes in countless tales of resistance throughout history, from the Jewish Maccabees rebelling against Hellenistic rule to Mahatma Gandhi leading India's non-violent struggle for independence. Each of these movements shares common themes: the fight for freedom, the preservation of identity, and the triumph of hope over despair. What can we learn from these parallels? First, that resistance takes many forms, from armed rebellion to peaceful protest. Second, that the success of such movements often depends on timing, strategy, and unity. Finally, that resistance is not just about opposing oppression, it's about envisioning and building a better future. In today's world, where authoritarian regimes and cultural homogenization threaten diversity, the story of Lalung offers inspiration. It reminds us that even in the face of overwhelming odds, individuals can make a difference. But it also warns us of the costs of conflict, both personal and societal. How do we balance idealism with pragmatism? And how do we ensure that our struggles lead to lasting change? Part 6: The Enduring Legacy of Langdarma and Lalung Pelgi Dorje. A story that transcends time. The legacy of Langdarma and Lalung Pelgi Dorje is not confined to the pages of history books. It lives on in the hearts and minds of people who draw strength from their example. Whether in the context of Tibetan Buddhism, global activism, or personal growth, their story continues to inspire reflection and action. At its core, this tale is about resilience, the ability to endure hardship without losing sight of one's values. It teaches us that adversity, while painful, can also be transformative. Just as pressure turns coal into diamonds, so too can challenges refine our character and deepen our resolve. But resilience is not just about survival, it's about thriving. It's about finding meaning in suffering and using it as fuel for growth. Consider the monks who practiced in secret during Langdarma's reign. Their perseverance ensured the survival of Buddhism, but it also enriched the tradition, making it more adaptable and inclusive. Doesn't this remind us that difficulties can be opportunities in disguise? Lessons for modern life. What lessons can we extract from this ancient saga? Here are a few key takeaways. The power of belief, faith, whether religious, philosophical, or personal, is a source of strength. It gives us direction and purpose, helping us navigate life's uncertainties. The importance of adaptability. Change is inevitable, but it doesn't have to mean loss. By embracing flexibility, we can preserve what matters most while evolving to meet new challenges. The value of community. Resistance is rarely a solo endeavor. It requires collaboration, trust, and shared vision. Together, we can achieve what seems impossible alone. The complexity of morality, ethical dilemmas are part of life. Rather than seeking easy answers, we must grapple with ambiguity and strive for wisdom. The cyclical nature of history, oppression and resistance, destruction and renewal, these cycles repeat themselves. Understanding them helps us anticipate patterns and work toward positive outcomes. Cultural preservation in a globalized world. In an era of rapid globalization, the story of Langdarma and Lalung Pelgi Dorje carries special significance. As cultures blend and boundaries blur, the question of identity becomes increasingly urgent. How do we preserve our heritage without isolating ourselves from the wider world? For Tibetans, this dilemma is particularly acute. Under Chinese rule, they face immense pressure to assimilate. Yet, their commitment to preserving language, religion, and customs remains unwavering. The assassination of Langdarma serves as a rallying cry, a reminder that cultural survival requires vigilance and sacrifice. But the challenge extends beyond Tibet. Indigenous communities worldwide grapple with similar issues, striving to maintain their traditions amidst encroaching modernity. What strategies can they employ? Education, documentation, and advocacy are crucial, but so is creativity. By adapting old practices to new contexts, they can keep their heritage alive and relevant. Philosophical reflections on freedom. Ultimately, the story of Langdarma and Lalung Pelgyi Dorje invites us to reflect on the nature of freedom. What does it mean to be free, not just politically, but spiritually and intellectually? True freedom, I believe, lies in the ability to choose one's path while respecting others' rights to do the same. It also involves recognizing interconnectedness. No individual exists in isolation, our choices affect those around us. Therefore, freedom must be tempered with responsibility. We cannot claim liberty for ourselves while denying it to others. Nor can we pursue personal gain at the expense of communal well-being. This balance between autonomy and accountability is delicate yet essential. It requires constant negotiation, humility, and empathy. Perhaps this is the ultimate lesson of the Langdarma saga, that freedom is not a destination but a journey, a continuous effort to align our actions with our values. The mythological resonance of Lalung's act. Lalung Pelgyi Dorje's assassination of King Langdarma has transcended its historical roots to become a mythological archetype, a symbol of defiance against tyranny and the triumph of righteousness. In Tibetan culture, his act is often depicted not just as a political maneuver but as a cosmic event, where good confronts evil and restores balance to the world. This mythologization speaks volumes about how societies process trauma and transformation through storytelling. Imagine the imagery: Lalung, cloaked in disguise, riding a black horse under the cover of night, firing an arrow that pierces the heart of a ruler who sought to extinguish the light of Buddhism. The symbolism is rich, the darkness of the horse blending with the shadows, the arrow representing precision and inevitability, and the king's fall signifying the collapse of an unjust order. These elements elevate the story beyond mere history, transforming it into a universal tale of justice prevailing over oppression. But why do we mythologize such events? Perhaps because myths allow us to grapple with the incomprehensible. They provide frameworks for understanding suffering, courage, and redemption. Through myth, we distill complex realities into digestible narratives that resonate across generations. Isn't it fascinating how stories shape our collective consciousness, offering solace and guidance in times of uncertainty? Langdarma's Shadow, a cautionary tale. While Lalung is celebrated as a hero, Langdarma remains a cautionary figure, a reminder of the dangers of unchecked power and ideological rigidity. His reign serves as a mirror reflecting the consequences of suppressing diversity and imposing uniformity. By targeting Buddhism, he inadvertently highlighted the resilience of belief systems and the futility of attempting to erase deeply ingrained cultural identities. Yet, Langdarma's legacy is not entirely negative. He forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about leadership and governance. What drives rulers to suppress dissent? Is it fear of losing control, or a misguided belief that homogeneity equals stability? And what happens when leaders prioritize short-term gains over long-term sustainability? These questions are particularly relevant today, as authoritarian regimes around the world employ similar tactics to consolidate power. From censorship to persecution, the methods may vary, but the underlying motivations remain strikingly familiar. Langdarma's story warns us of the perils of such approaches, urging us to seek inclusive and equitable solutions instead. The interplay of memory and identity. The enduring legacy of Langdarma and Lalung also sheds light on the interplay between memory and identity. For Tibetans, this saga is not just a historical episode, it is a cornerstone of their cultural and spiritual heritage. It shapes how they see themselves, as a people who have endured hardships yet remained steadfast in their beliefs. Memory, however, is not static. It evolves with time, influenced by social, political, and environmental factors. Consider how the interpretation of Langdarma's reign has shifted over centuries. Initially vilified as a tyrant, he later became a symbol of resistance against foreign influence. Similarly, Lalung's act has been reinterpreted through various lenses, sometimes as a heroic deed, other times as a morally ambiguous choice. This fluidity underscores the importance of critical engagement with history. Rather than accepting narratives at face value, we must interrogate them, asking whose voices are included and whose are excluded. By doing so, we enrich our understanding of the past and empower ourselves to shape the future. Cultural revival and innovation. One of the most remarkable aspects of the post-Langdarma era is the cultural revival that followed. Despite, or perhaps because of, the challenges faced during the era of fragmentation, Tibetans demonstrated incredible creativity and innovation. Monasteries, once centers of suppression, became crucibles of renewal. Art, literature, philosophy, and science flourished, fueled by the rediscovery of hidden treasures, terma, and the contributions of visionary figures like Atissa and Marpa. This period of Renaissance offers valuable lessons for contemporary societies grappling with crises. When institutions falter, individuals often step up, finding new ways to preserve and innovate. Creativity thrives in adversity, as constraints force us to think outside the box. Doesn't this remind us that limitations can sometimes be liberating? Moreover, the emergence of diverse schools of Tibetan Buddhism highlights the importance of pluralism. Each tradition, Kagyu, Sakya, Gelug, brought unique perspectives and practices, enriching the overall tapestry of spirituality. This diversity ensured that Buddhism could adapt to changing circumstances without losing its essence. Isn't it inspiring how unity and variety can coexist harmoniously? The role of leadership in cultural preservation. Leadership plays a crucial role in shaping cultural trajectories. Figures like Atissa and Marpa exemplify the transformative impact of visionary leaders who bridge gaps between tradition and innovation. Atissa's emphasis on compassion and ethical conduct revitalized Buddhist philosophy, making it accessible to ordinary people. Marpa's commitment to cross-cultural exchange introduced new ideas while honoring indigenous wisdom. Their examples underscore the importance of adaptive leadership, leaders who listen, learn, and evolve alongside their communities. Such leaders recognize that preservation does not mean stagnation, it means growth rooted in authenticity. How can modern leaders emulate this approach? By fostering dialogue, encouraging experimentation, and prioritizing inclusivity, they can create environments where cultures thrive rather than merely survive. Part 7. The Philosophical Dimensions of Oppression and Liberation. Oppression as a universal experience. Oppression is not unique to any one culture or era, it is a universal experience that manifests in myriad forms. Whether through political domination, economic exploitation, or cultural erasure, oppression seeks to strip individuals and communities of agency, dignity, and identity. Yet, history shows us that resistance is equally universal, a testament to the indomitable human spirit. The story of Langdarma and Lalung encapsulates this dynamic perfectly. Langdarma's persecution of Buddhism represents the oppressive impulse to impose conformity and silence dissent. Lalung's assassination embodies the liberatory drive to reclaim autonomy and restore justice. Together, they illustrate the eternal tension between control and freedom, authority and rebellion. But oppression is not monolithic, it operates on multiple levels: personal, societal, institutional. Understanding these dimensions helps us identify leverage points for change. For instance, personal oppression might involve internalized shame or self-doubt, while societal oppression manifests as systemic inequalities. Institutional oppression, meanwhile, perpetuates structures that marginalize certain groups. Addressing these layers requires different strategies but shares a common goal: empowerment. The paradox of power. Power lies at the heart of both oppression and liberation. Those who wield it often do so to maintain dominance, while those who resist seek to redistribute it more equitably. Yet, power itself is paradoxical. It can corrupt or uplift, destroy or create, depending on how it is used. Consider Langdarma's use of power. By targeting Buddhist monasteries, he aimed to centralize authority and eliminate threats to his rule. But in doing so, he alienated large segments of the population, undermining his own legitimacy. Conversely, Lalung's act of defiance demonstrates the subversive potential of power when wielded ethically. Though he employed violence, his intent was to protect a cherished way of life, restoring balance to a fractured society. This duality invites us to reflect on our relationship with power. Do we hoard it selfishly or share it generously? Do we use it to dominate or to empower? These choices define not only our character but also the legacy we leave behind. Liberation as a process, not a destination. Liberation, like freedom, is not a fixed state but an ongoing process. It requires vigilance, effort, and collaboration. Even after Lalung assassinated Langdarma, the work of rebuilding Tibetan society continued for centuries. Monks had to reconstruct temples, translate texts, and reintegrate Buddhism into daily life. Communities had to heal from trauma and rebuild trust. This gradual nature of liberation reminds us that progress is rarely linear. Setbacks are inevitable, but they need not derail us. Instead, they offer opportunities to reassess, recalibrate, and redouble our efforts. As the saying goes, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. Patience and persistence are key. The ethics of resistance. Resistance raises profound ethical questions. When is it justified to oppose authority? What methods are acceptable, and which cross moral boundaries? Lalung's assassination of Langdarma exemplifies the complexity of these issues. While his act ended a reign of persecution, it also involved deception and violence, actions traditionally considered unethical. This tension between ends and means is central to ethical philosophy. Utilitarianism might justify Lalung's actions if they resulted in greater overall good. Deontological ethics, however, would condemn them as inherently wrong, regardless of outcomes. Virtue ethics, meanwhile, would evaluate Lalung's character and intentions, weighing his courage and selflessness against his resort to violence. These debates challenge us to clarify our own values. Are there absolutes in morality, or is everything relative? And how do we navigate gray areas where principles conflict? Engaging with these questions strengthens our moral reasoning, equipping us to make informed decisions in complex situations. The role of hope in liberation. Hope is the fuel that powers liberation movements. Without it, resistance becomes futile, and despair takes hold. The monks who practiced Buddhism in secret during Langdarma's reign embodied this hope. Despite facing persecution, they believed in a better future, a time when their faith could flourish openly again. Hope is not blind optimism, it is grounded in possibility. It acknowledges difficulties while affirming the potential for change. As Václav Havel famously wrote, hope is not the conviction that something will turn out well, but the certainty that something makes sense, regardless of how it turns out. This perspective sustains activists, artists, and dreamers alike, reminding them that every small action contributes to a larger purpose. In today's world, where challenges seem insurmountable, hope remains vital. Whether combating climate change, fighting for human rights, or preserving cultural heritage, we must cultivate hope, not as a passive wish but as an active commitment to creating the world we envision. The dialectic of oppression and liberation. Oppression and liberation are not static states but dynamic forces engaged in an eternal dialectic, a push-and-pull relationship that shapes societies and individuals alike. This dialectic is evident in the story of Langdarma and Lalong Pelgi Dorje, where the tension between tyranny and freedom drives the narrative forward. But what can we learn from this interplay? How does it manifest in our own lives? At its core, the dialectic reflects the human condition, the perpetual struggle to assert agency in a world that often seeks to constrain us. Oppression arises when power is centralized and wielded without accountability, while liberation emerges when individuals and communities reclaim their autonomy. Yet, these forces are not mutually exclusive, they coexist in a delicate balance. For every act of suppression, there is a counterforce of resistance waiting to emerge. Consider the monks who practiced Buddhism in secret during Langdarma's reign. Their clandestine efforts were not just acts of survival but assertions of identity. By preserving their faith, they resisted the erasure of their cultural heritage. This resistance was not merely reactive, it was proactive, rooted in a vision of renewal. Isn't it remarkable how even in the darkest moments, the seeds of liberation are sown? The ethics of violence in resistance. One of the most contentious aspects of resistance is the use of violence. Lalong Pelgi Dorje's assassination of Langdarma raises profound ethical questions about the morality of violent resistance. Was his act justified given the circumstances, or did it perpetuate a cycle of harm? These questions resonate deeply in contemporary discussions of activism and social justice. Philosophers have long debated the ethics of violence in resistance. Some, like Mahatma Gandhi, advocate for non-violent methods, arguing that violence dehumanizes both oppressor and oppressed. Others, like Frantz Fanon, contend that violence can be a necessary tool for dismantling oppressive systems, particularly when all other avenues have been exhausted. Where do we draw the line? And how do we weigh the costs and benefits of such actions? Lalong's story complicates these debates further. While his assassination ended Langdarma's persecution of Buddhism, it also plunged Tibet into chaos, leading to the era of fragmentation. This outcome underscores the unintended consequences of violence. Even when motivated by noble intentions, violent resistance can destabilize societies and create new forms of suffering. Doesn't this remind us of the importance of foresight and responsibility in our actions? The role of nonviolence in liberation movements. While Lalong's act was violent, history offers numerous examples of successful nonviolent resistance movements. Figures like Martin Luther King Jr., Nelson Mandela, and Aung San Suu Kyi demonstrate the transformative power of peaceful protest, civil disobedience, and dialogue. Their approaches challenge the notion that violence is the only path to liberation. Nonviolence operates on several levels. First, it appeals to the moral conscience of oppressors, exposing the injustice of their actions. Second, it builds solidarity among those resisting, fostering unity and resilience. Finally, it undermines the legitimacy of oppressive regimes by highlighting their reliance on coercion rather than consent. In many ways, nonviolence is a form of psychological warfare, one that seeks to win hearts and minds rather than battles. Yet, nonviolence requires immense courage and discipline. It demands that individuals endure suffering without retaliation, trusting that their sacrifices will inspire change. This trust is not naive optimism but a strategic calculation based on the belief that truth and justice will ultimately prevail. As Gandhi famously said, the future depends on what you do today. Each act of nonviolent resistance contributes to a larger wave of transformation. The interconnectedness of oppression and liberation. Oppression and liberation are not isolated phenomena, they are interconnected, influencing and shaping one another. This interconnectedness is evident in the aftermath of Langdarma's assassination. While his death marked the end of systematic persecution, it also triggered a period of instability that tested the resilience of Tibetan society. Similarly, the resurgence of Buddhism during the post-fragmentation era demonstrated how liberation often emerges from the ashes of oppression. This interconnectedness extends beyond individual events to encompass broader historical patterns. Oppression creates conditions that necessitate resistance, which in turn leads to liberation, or at least the potential for it. However, liberation is rarely complete. It often leaves unresolved tensions that may give rise to new forms of oppression. This cyclical nature challenges us to think critically about how we define progress and whether true liberation is ever fully attainable. The paradox of freedom in oppression. Freedom is a paradoxical concept, especially in contexts of oppression. On one hand, oppression seeks to restrict freedom, imposing constraints that limit individual and collective agency. On the other hand, oppression often galvanizes people to fight for their freedom, transforming adversity into a catalyst for empowerment. This paradox is central to understanding the dynamics of resistance. For instance, the monks who practiced Buddhism in secret during Langdarma's reign experienced a profound sense of freedom despite their circumstances. Their ability to preserve their faith in the face of persecution affirmed their agency and strengthened their resolve. In this sense, freedom is not the absence of constraints but the capacity to transcend them, to find meaning and purpose even in the most challenging situations. This perspective invites us to rethink our understanding of freedom. Is it solely about external conditions, or does it also involve internal states of being? Can we experience freedom while enduring hardship, and if so, what does that look like? These questions deepen our appreciation for the complexity of human experience and the resilience of the human spirit. Part 8: The Intersection of Spirituality and Resistance in Tibetan History. Spirituality as a source of strength. Throughout Tibetan history, spirituality has served as a source of strength and resilience, particularly during periods of oppression. The teachings of Buddhism emphasize impermanence, compassion, and the interconnectedness of all beings, principles that provide solace and guidance in times of crisis. For Tibetans facing persecution under Langdarma, these teachings offered a framework for understanding suffering and finding hope amidst despair. Imagine the comfort derived from meditating on the impermanence of hardship. If everything changes, then even the darkest moments are temporary. This realization empowers individuals to endure difficulties with patience and equanimity, knowing that brighter days lie ahead. Similarly, the practice of compassion fosters empathy and solidarity, reminding us that we are not alone in our struggles. Together, these principles create a foundation for resistance, one rooted in wisdom and love rather than fear and anger. The role of monasteries in resistance. Monasteries played a pivotal role in Tibetan resistance against Langdarma's persecution. Far from being passive institutions, they became active participants in the struggle to preserve Buddhism. Through oral transmission, hidden treasures, terma, and covert practices, monks ensured that the teachings survived even as temples were destroyed and scriptures burned. But monasteries were more than repositories of knowledge, they were sanctuaries for the human spirit. Within their walls, individuals found refuge from the chaos of the outside world. They engaged in meditation, study, and ritual, cultivating inner peace and clarity. These practices equipped them to face external challenges with grace and determination. Doesn't this highlight the dual function of monasteries as centers of spiritual practice and hubs of resistance? Moreover, monasteries fostered a sense of community that transcended individual differences. Monks from diverse backgrounds came together to support one another, united by a shared commitment to their faith. This unity strengthened their resolve and amplified their impact. It reminds us that resistance is not just about opposing oppression but about building alternative structures that embody the values we seek to uphold. The syncretism of Bon and Buddhism. One of the most fascinating aspects of Tibetan spirituality is its syncretic nature, the blending of Bon and Buddhist traditions. While these two systems initially clashed, over time they influenced each other, creating a uniquely Tibetan expression of spirituality. This syncretism reflects the adaptability of belief systems and their capacity to evolve in response to changing circumstances. During Langdarma's reign, Bon practitioners viewed Buddhism as a threat to their cultural identity. Yet, figures like Padmasambhava integrated elements of Bon into Buddhist practices, bridging the gap between the two traditions. This integration enriched Tibetan spirituality, making it more inclusive and resilient. It also highlights the importance of dialogue and mutual respect in overcoming divisions. Syncretism teaches us that diversity need not lead to conflict, it can be a source of strength and innovation. By embracing multiple perspectives, we expand our understanding and deepen our connection to the world around us. Isn't this a lesson we could all benefit from in our increasingly polarized societies? The legacy of spiritual leaders. Spiritual leaders have played a crucial role in shaping Tibetan resistance and revival. Figures like Atissa, Marpa Lotsawa, and Je Tsongkhapa exemplify the transformative impact of visionary leadership. Their contributions went beyond religious teachings, they addressed social, political, and cultural dimensions of Tibetan life. Atissa's emphasis on compassion and ethical conduct revitalized Buddhist philosophy, making it accessible to ordinary people. His work laid the foundation for the Lamrim tradition, which continues to guide practitioners today. Marpa's commitment to cross-cultural exchange introduced new ideas while honoring indigenous wisdom, ensuring that Buddhism remained relevant in a changing world. Je Tsongkhapa's reforms emphasized monastic discipline and logical analysis, restoring the purity of Buddhist practice. These leaders remind us that spirituality is not separate from daily life but integral to it. They challenged their followers to live authentically, aligning their actions with their values. In doing so, they inspired generations to resist oppression and strive for liberation, not just for themselves but for all beings. The universal appeal of Tibetan spirituality. Tibetan spirituality has captivated audiences worldwide, offering insights into the nature of existence and the path to enlightenment. Its universal appeal lies in its emphasis on compassion, mindfulness, and interconnectedness, values that resonate across cultures and religions. From the Dalai Lama's advocacy for global peace to the popularity of meditation practices like mindfulness and loving-kindness, Tibetan Buddhism continues to inspire millions. This global reach underscores the importance of cultural preservation. By safeguarding their spiritual heritage, Tibetans contribute to humanity's collective wisdom, enriching our understanding of what it means to live fully and meaningfully. It also highlights the responsibility we all share to protect endangered traditions and ensure their survival for future generations. The monastic tradition as a bastion of cultural memory. Monasteries were not just spiritual sanctuaries, they were repositories of cultural memory, preserving the intellectual, artistic, and ethical heritage of Tibet. During Langdarma's reign, when Buddhist institutions faced systematic dismantling, monasteries became clandestine archives where sacred texts, rituals, and oral traditions were safeguarded. This preservation was not merely an act of defiance, it was an affirmation of identity, a declaration that culture and faith could survive even under the harshest conditions. Consider the role of terma, hidden treasures, in this process. These concealed texts, often buried in caves or embedded in landscapes, symbolize the resilience of knowledge. They carried not only religious teachings but also poetry, philosophy, and medical wisdom, reflecting the holistic nature of Tibetan spirituality. The concept of terma itself is deeply symbolic. It suggests that truth, once hidden, will eventually resurface when the time is right. Doesn't this metaphor resonate with our own lives? How often do we bury parts of ourselves during difficult times, only to rediscover them later? Moreover, the practice of oral transmission ensured that teaching survived even when written records were destroyed. Monks memorized scriptures, chants, and commentaries, passing them down through generations. This reliance on memory highlights the importance of human connection in preserving tradition. It reminds us that knowledge is not static, it is alive, carried forward by those who dedicate themselves to its protection. The rituals of resistance. Rituals played a crucial role in sustaining Tibetan resistance during periods of persecution. Whether performed openly or in secret, these practices served as acts of defiance, affirming the continuity of faith despite external pressures. For instance, meditation sessions, prayer ceremonies, and initiations allowed practitioners to reconnect with their spiritual roots, reinforcing their sense of purpose and belonging. One particularly powerful ritual was the visualization of deities associated with protection and empowerment. Practitioners invoked figures like Vajrapani, the embodiment of indestructible strength, or Tara, the compassionate savior, seeking their blessings to overcome adversity. These visualizations were not mere fantasies, they were tools for cultivating inner resilience. By imagining themselves as inseparable from these divine beings, practitioners tapped into qualities like courage, wisdom, and compassion, which fortified them against despair. Rituals also fostered community cohesion. When monks gathered to perform ceremonies, they created spaces of solidarity where individuals could share their struggles and aspirations. These moments of collective practice reminded participants that they were part of something larger than themselves, a lineage of resistance and renewal. Isn't it remarkable how rituals can transform fear into hope and isolation into unity? The philosophy of non-attachment in resistance. A core tenet of Buddhism is non-attachment, the idea that clinging to outcomes leads to suffering. While this principle might seem counterintuitive in the context of resistance, it actually provides profound guidance for navigating adversity. Non-attachment does not mean indifference, rather, it involves letting go of attachment to specific results while remaining committed to one's values and actions. For the monks resisting Langdarma's persecution, non-attachment offered a way to endure hardship without losing sight of their mission. They understood that the survival of Buddhism was not guaranteed, but they acted with unwavering dedication nonetheless. Their focus was not on achieving immediate success but on embodying the principles of compassion, wisdom, and perseverance. In doing so, they demonstrated that true resistance is not about winning or losing, it's about staying true to oneself. This philosophy has broader implications for modern activism. In a world obsessed with measurable outcomes, non-attachment encourages us to value the process over the result. It reminds us that every small effort contributes to a larger wave of change, even if we don't see the impact immediately. As the Dalai Lama often says, if you think you are too small to make a difference, try sleeping with a mosquito. Every action matters, regardless of its scale. The role of compassion in liberation movements. Compassion lies at the heart of Tibetan Buddhism and serves as a guiding principle for resistance movements. Unlike anger or hatred, which can fuel cycles of violence, compassion seeks to heal wounds and bridge divides. It recognizes the humanity of oppressors while standing firmly against their actions. This nuanced approach challenges us to resist oppression without becoming oppressors ourselves. During Langdarma's reign, compassion manifested in subtle yet powerful ways. Monks who practiced in secret did so not out of hatred for their persecutors but out of love for their tradition and community. Their goal was not revenge but restoration, to create conditions where Buddhism could thrive again. This distinction is crucial. It transforms resistance from a zero-sum game into a collaborative effort to build a better future. Compassion also extends beyond individual acts to encompass systemic change. By addressing the root causes of oppression, ignorance, greed, and fear, we can prevent its recurrence. This requires empathy, patience, and a willingness to engage in dialogue. It reminds us that liberation is not just about defeating enemies, it's about transforming relationships and fostering understanding. The interplay of spirituality and politics. The intersection of spirituality and politics is a recurring theme in Tibetan history. From Songtsen Gampo's introduction of Buddhism as a state religion to the Dalai Lama's leadership in exile, Tibetan spirituality has always been intertwined with governance. This interplay reflects the belief that ethical conduct and compassionate leadership are essential for creating harmonious societies. Langdarma's persecution of Buddhism exemplifies what happens when this balance is disrupted. By targeting religious institutions, he undermined the moral foundation of his rule, alienating both clergy and laity. Conversely, leaders like Atissa and Je Tsongkhapa restored harmony by aligning governance with spiritual principles. Their reforms emphasized transparency, accountability, and service to others, ensuring that power was exercised responsibly. This interplay raises important questions about the role of spirituality in modern politics. Can religious values inform public policy without imposing dogma? How do we navigate the tension between secularism and faith? These debates highlight the need for inclusive frameworks that honor diversity while promoting shared values. Part 9: The Global Relevance of Tibetan Resilience. Tibetan resilience as a model for global activism. The story of Tibetan resilience offers valuable lessons for activists worldwide. Despite centuries of adversity, from Langdarma's persecution to Chinese occupation, Tibetans have maintained their cultural and spiritual heritage with remarkable determination. Their example demonstrates that resistance is not just about opposing oppression but about preserving and celebrating what makes us unique. One key takeaway is the importance of adaptability. Tibetans have consistently found creative ways to preserve their traditions, whether through oral transmission, hidden treasures, terma, or syncretic practices that blend Bon and Buddhist elements. This adaptability ensures that culture remains dynamic and relevant, capable of evolving without losing its essence. Isn't this a lesson we could all apply in our efforts to protect endangered languages, customs, and ecosystems? Another takeaway is the power of storytelling. The mythologization of Lolong Pelgi Dorj's assassination shows how narratives can inspire action and sustain hope. Stories connect us to our past, ground us in the present, and guide us toward the future. By sharing their experiences, Tibetans remind us of the importance of documenting and disseminating our own struggles and triumphs. The universal appeal of Tibetan wisdom. Tibetan wisdom has universal appeal because it addresses fundamental questions about existence. Who am I? Why am I here? What is my relationship to others and the world around me? These inquiries transcend cultural boundaries, resonating with people from all walks of life. From mindfulness meditation to the philosophy of emptiness, Tibetan teachings offer practical tools for navigating life's complexities. The global popularity of the Dalai Lama exemplifies this appeal. His advocacy for peace, compassion, and environmental sustainability speaks to universal aspirations for a better world. Similarly, practices like Tonglen, exchanging self and others, and Lojong, mind training, provide concrete methods for cultivating empathy and resilience. These teachings remind us that personal transformation is inseparable from social change. The struggle for cultural sovereignty. In today's globalized world, the struggle for cultural sovereignty is more urgent than ever. Indigenous communities, linguistic minorities, and marginalized groups face immense pressure to assimilate into dominant cultures. The Tibetan experience underscores the importance of resisting homogenization while embracing innovation. For Tibetans, cultural sovereignty means more than preserving language and customs. It involves asserting agency over their own destiny. Under Chinese rule, this has proven especially challenging, as policies aimed at assimilation threaten to erase Tibetan identity. Yet, despite these pressures, Tibetans continue to resist, using art, music, literature, and digital platforms to amplify their voices. This struggle has parallels worldwide. From Native American tribes fighting to protect sacred lands to African nations reclaiming pre-colonial histories, the fight for cultural sovereignty is a global phenomenon. It reminds us that diversity is not just a matter of aesthetics, it is essential for humanity's survival and flourishing. The role of international solidarity. International solidarity plays a critical role in supporting Tibetan resilience. Advocacy groups, governments, and individuals around the world have rallied behind the Tibetan cause, raising awareness about human rights abuses and promoting cultural preservation. This support demonstrates the power of collective action in amplifying marginalized voices. However, solidarity must be rooted in respect and reciprocity. Allies should listen to Tibetan perspectives, honor their leadership, and avoid imposing external agendas. True partnership involves recognizing the agency of those most affected by injustice and empowering them to lead the charge for change. Doesn't this principle apply to all forms of activism? The future of Tibetan resistance. As we look to the future, the question arises, what lies ahead for Tibetan resistance? Will the movement succeed in securing autonomy, or will it continue to face repression? While the outcome remains uncertain, one thing is clear, the spirit of resistance will endure. Younger generations of Tibetans are finding innovative ways to carry the torch, leveraging technology and social media to document abuses, share stories, and mobilize support. Artists, writers, and musicians are reimagining traditional forms, infusing them with contemporary relevance. These efforts ensure that Tibetan culture remains vibrant and adaptable, capable of thriving in a rapidly changing world. Ultimately, the future of Tibetan resistance depends on all of us. By standing in solidarity, amplifying marginalized voices, and advocating for justice, we contribute to a global movement for liberation, one that transcends borders and embraces the interconnectedness of all beings. The power of art and culture in resistance. Art and culture have long been powerful tools for resistance, and Tibetans have harnessed these mediums with extraordinary creativity. From Thenka paintings to sand mandalas, from traditional opera to modern hip-hop, Tibetan art serves as both a celebration of heritage and a form of protest. These expressions are not merely aesthetic, they carry profound political and spiritual significance. Consider the symbolism embedded in Tibetan visual arts. Thenkas, intricate scroll paintings depicting deities, bodhisattvas, and mandalas, are more than religious artifacts, they are maps of the cosmos and guides for spiritual practice. During periods of persecution, these artworks became covert carriers of meaning, preserving sacred knowledge while evading detection. Similarly, sand mandalas, painstakingly created and then ceremonially dismantled, embody the Buddhist principle of impermanence, a poignant reminder that all things, including oppression, are transient. In contemporary times, Tibetan artists have adapted traditional forms to address modern challenges. For instance, exile communities have embraced photography, film, and digital media to document their experiences and advocate for human rights. These works challenge stereotypes, amplify marginalized voices, and foster global awareness. Isn't it inspiring how creativity can transform pain into beauty and despair into hope? Music and dance also play vital roles in Tibetan resistance. Traditional songs, often accompanied by instruments like the dramnian, a six-stringed lute, tell stories of heroism, loss, and resilience. In recent years, younger generations have blended these elements with Western genres like rock, rap, and electronic music, creating hybrid styles that resonate with international audiences. This fusion reflects the adaptability of Tibetan culture, ensuring its survival in a globalized world. The role of education in preserving identity. Education is a cornerstone of cultural preservation, and Tibetans have prioritized it as a means of safeguarding their identity. Under Chinese rule, access to Tibetan language education has been severely restricted, prompting communities to establish underground schools and monastic institutions. These efforts underscore the belief that knowledge is power, a tool for reclaiming agency and resisting assimilation. One notable example is the establishment of Tibetan Children's Villages, TCVs, in exile. Founded by the Dalai Lama and other leaders, these schools provide holistic education that integrates academic learning with spiritual and cultural instruction. Students study subjects ranging from mathematics to meditation, ensuring that they develop intellectually, emotionally, and spiritually. By nurturing well-rounded individuals, TCVs prepare future generations to lead the movement for Tibetan autonomy. Education also fosters critical thinking and civic engagement. By teaching students about their history, rights, and responsibilities, educators empower them to become agents of change. This emphasis on empowerment aligns with broader principles of liberation movements worldwide, which recognize that true freedom begins with informed and active citizens. Doesn't this remind us of the transformative potential of education, not just as a means of acquiring skills but as a catalyst for social transformation? The environmental dimension of Tibetan resistance. Tibet's unique environment plays a central role in its cultural and spiritual identity. Known as the roof of the world, the Tibetan Plateau is home to vast grasslands, towering mountains, and sacred lakes. It is also the source of major rivers like the Yangtze, Mekong, and Brahmaputra, making it a vital ecological resource for Asia. However, environmental degradation poses a significant threat to both Tibetan livelihoods and global sustainability. Under Chinese rule, large-scale infrastructure projects, including dams, mines, and railways, have disrupted ecosystems and displaced communities. These developments prioritize economic growth over environmental stewardship, exacerbating issues like deforestation, desertification, and water scarcity. For Tibetans, whose spiritual practices are deeply connected to the land, this exploitation represents a form of cultural violence. In response, Tibetan activists have framed their resistance as an environmental movement, highlighting the interconnectedness of ecological and cultural preservation. Organizations like Students for a Free Tibet and the International Campaign for Tibet have partnered with environmental groups to raise awareness about these issues. They argue that protecting Tibet's environment is not just a local concern but a global imperative, given its impact on climate patterns and biodiversity. This environmental dimension adds another layer to the Tibetan struggle, emphasizing the importance of sustainable development and indigenous sovereignty. It reminds us that liberation movements must address not only political and cultural dimensions but also ecological ones. After all, how can we achieve freedom if we destroy the very foundation of life? The intersection of technology and activism. Technology has revolutionized the way resistance movements operate, and Tibetans have embraced digital platforms to amplify their message. Social media, in particular, has become a double-edged sword, offering unprecedented opportunities for visibility while posing risks of surveillance and censorship. Despite these challenges, Tibetan activists have leveraged technology to build networks, share information, and mobilize support. For instance, platforms like Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube allow activists to bypass state-controlled media and reach global audiences directly. Hashtags like #FreeTibet and #SaveTibet have trended worldwide, sparking conversations and galvanizing action. Online petitions, crowdfunding campaigns, and virtual protests enable supporters to contribute regardless of geographic location. This democratization of activism ensures that even those far removed from the conflict can participate meaningfully. However, the use of technology requires vigilance. Digital surveillance and cyber attacks pose serious threats to activists' safety, forcing them to adopt encryption tools, anonymous browsing methods, and secure communication channels. This cat-and-mouse game highlights the ongoing battle for control over information, a battle that mirrors the larger struggle for freedom itself. The importance of intergenerational dialogue. Intergenerational dialogue is crucial for sustaining Tibetan resistance across time. Elders, who lived through earlier periods of persecution, pass down oral histories, rituals, and wisdom to younger generations. Meanwhile, youth bring fresh perspectives, energy, and technological savvy to the movement. Together, they create a dynamic interplay between tradition and innovation. This dialogue is particularly important in exile communities, where maintaining cultural continuity can be challenging. Programs that connect elders with youth, through storytelling sessions, mentorship initiatives, and collaborative projects, help bridge generational gaps. They ensure that the lessons of the past inform the strategies of the present, fostering a sense of unity and purpose. Moreover, intergenerational dialogue extends beyond familial bonds to encompass broader societal interactions. For example, monks and nuns often serve as intermediaries between older and younger generations, offering guidance based on spiritual teachings. Their role underscores the importance of shared values in bridging divides and building cohesive movements. Part 10. Reflections on Human Resilience and the Eternal Struggle for Freedom. The nature of resilience. Resilience is one of humanity's most remarkable qualities, the ability to endure hardship, adapt to adversity, and emerge stronger. The story of Tibetan resilience exemplifies this trait, demonstrating that even in the face of overwhelming odds, individuals and communities can find ways to persevere. But what exactly is resilience, and how does it manifest in different contexts? At its core, resilience involves three key components: endurance, adaptation, and transformation. Endurance refers to the capacity to withstand suffering without losing hope or purpose. Adaptation involves finding creative solutions to overcome obstacles, whether through innovation, collaboration, or perseverance. Transformation entails using adversity as a catalyst for growth, turning challenges into opportunities for renewal. These components are evident in the Tibetan experience. Monks who practiced in secret during Langdarma's reign embodied endurance, refusing to abandon their faith despite persecution. Artists and educators who preserved cultural traditions in exile demonstrated adaptation, finding new ways to express and transmit their heritage. Activists who leveraged technology and environmental advocacy showcased transformation, reimagining resistance for the modern era. Resilience is not innate. It is cultivated through practice, community, and reflection. It requires courage to confront fear, patience to navigate uncertainty, and wisdom to discern when to act and when to wait. As we reflect on the Tibetan saga, we might ask ourselves, how can we cultivate resilience in our own lives? What resources, internal and external, can we draw upon to face challenges with grace and determination? The eternal struggle for freedom. Freedom is perhaps the most universal aspiration, yet it remains elusive for many. The Tibetan struggle for autonomy highlights the complexities of this quest, reminding us that freedom is not a singular state but a multifaceted journey. It encompasses personal liberty, cultural sovereignty, political self-determination, and ecological sustainability. The eternal struggle for freedom reflects humanity's dual nature, our capacity for both oppression and liberation. On one hand, we seek to dominate others, imposing our will through force or coercion. On the other hand, we yearn for connection, striving to build relationships based on mutual respect and understanding. This tension drives much of human history, shaping societies and individuals alike. What lessons can we extract from this struggle? First, that freedom is inherently relational. It depends on recognizing the dignity and agency of others. Second, that achieving freedom requires balancing individual rights with communal responsibilities. Finally, that freedom is never fully attained. It is a continuous process of negotiation, compromise, and growth. The paradox of suffering and growth. Suffering is an inevitable part of life, yet it holds paradoxical potential for growth. The Tibetan experience illustrates this paradox beautifully. Centuries of persecution have inflicted immense pain, yet they have also forged a resilient identity rooted in compassion, wisdom, and perseverance. This duality invites us to reconsider our relationship with suffering. Rather than viewing suffering as purely negative, we might see it as a teacher, a harsh but invaluable guide to understanding ourselves and the world around us. Suffering strips away illusions, revealing truths that comfort often obscures. It forces us to confront vulnerabilities, fostering empathy and humility. And it challenges us to find meaning in chaos, transforming despair into purpose. This perspective aligns with Buddhist teachings on the nature of suffering, dukkha. According to Buddhism, suffering arises from attachment to outcomes, identities, and desires. By letting go of these attachments, we free ourselves from unnecessary suffering and open up space for joy and fulfillment. While this process is difficult, it offers profound rewards, enabling us to live authentically and fully. The legacy of hope. Hope is the thread that ties together the tapestry of human resilience. Without hope, resistance becomes futile, and despair takes hold. The Tibetan saga is infused with hope, not as naive optimism but as a steadfast belief in the possibility of change. This hope sustains individuals and communities, fueling their efforts to resist oppression and reclaim freedom. Hope manifests in countless ways, in the prayers of monks, in the songs of artists, in the marches of activists, and in the quiet determination of ordinary people. It is both personal and collective, individual and universal. It reminds us that no matter how dark the night, dawn will eventually break. As we reflect on the legacy of Langdarma and Lalong Pelgi Dorje, we might consider the role of hope in our own lives. Where do we find it, and how do we nurture it? How can we channel hope into action, creating ripples of change that extend beyond ourselves? These questions invite us to engage actively with the world, contributing to a shared vision of justice, peace, and liberation. A call to action. The story of Tibetan resilience is not just a historical account, it is a call to action. It challenges us to examine our own roles in the global struggle for freedom and justice. Are we bystanders or participants? Do we perpetuate systems of oppression, or do we work to dismantle them? These choices define not only our character but also the legacy we leave behind. Each of us has a part to play, whether through advocacy, education, art, or everyday acts of kindness. By standing in solidarity with marginalized communities, amplifying their voices, and advocating for systemic change, we contribute to a movement that transcends borders and embraces the interconnectedness of all beings. Together, we can create a world where diversity is celebrated, freedom is honored, and resilience is nurtured. The role of memory in shaping resilience. Memory is a cornerstone of resilience, serving as both a repository of past experiences and a source of inspiration for future action. For Tibetans, collective memory has been instrumental in sustaining their cultural and spiritual heritage through centuries of adversity. This memory is not static, it evolves with time, shaped by storytelling, rituals, and shared practices that keep the past alive in the present. Consider the role of oral tradition in preserving Tibetan history. Before written records became widespread, elders passed down stories, songs, and teachings from generation to generation. These narratives were more than mere entertainment, they were vessels of wisdom, carrying lessons about identity, morality, and survival. Even today, oral transmission remains a vital component of Tibetan culture, ensuring that knowledge survives despite external pressures. But memory is not just about preservation, it is also about interpretation. How we remember events shapes how we understand them, and ourselves. For instance, the assassination of Langdarma has been mythologized over time, transforming from a historical event into a symbolic act of resistance. This process of reinterpretation allows communities to extract meaning from trauma, turning pain into purpose. Doesn't this remind us of the power of storytelling to heal wounds and foster resilience? Moreover, memory fosters solidarity. When individuals share a common narrative, they create bonds that transcend individual differences. These bonds strengthen communities, enabling them to face challenges collectively. In the case of Tibetans, shared memories of persecution and perseverance have united disparate groups under a single banner of resistance. Isn't it remarkable how memory can transform isolation into unity? The interplay between personal and collective resilience. Resilience operates on multiple levels: personal, familial, communal, and societal. While individual acts of courage inspire admiration, true resilience often emerges from collective effort. The Tibetan experience illustrates this interplay beautifully, showing how personal sacrifices contribute to larger movements for change. Take, for example, the monks who practiced Buddhism in secret during Langdarma's reign. Their actions were deeply personal, driven by faith and conviction. Yet, these acts had profound collective implications, ensuring the survival of Tibetan spirituality for future generations. Similarly, modern activists who risk arrest or exile to advocate for Tibetan autonomy embody this dual dynamic. Their bravery stems from personal commitment, but its impact resonates far beyond themselves. This interplay highlights the importance of community in fostering resilience. Individuals draw strength from the support of others, while communities benefit from the contributions of dedicated members. Together, they create feedback loops of empowerment, where each person's efforts amplify the whole. Doesn't this remind us of the African proverb, "If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together"? The ethics of resilience. While resilience is often celebrated as an unambiguously positive trait, it raises important ethical questions. What does it mean to endure suffering without losing hope? Is resilience always virtuous, or can it sometimes perpetuate harmful systems? These questions challenge us to examine the moral dimensions of resilience. For instance, resilience can be co-opted by oppressive regimes to justify inaction. Phrases like toughen up or adapt and overcome may mask systemic injustices, placing the burden of change on individuals rather than addressing root causes. In such cases, resilience becomes a tool of compliance rather than resistance. Conversely, when resilience is coupled with critical awareness and a commitment to justice, it becomes a force for liberation. The Tibetan saga exemplifies this distinction. Monks who preserved their faith during Langdarma's persecution did so not out of resignation but out of resistance. They understood that endurance was not an end in itself but a means to reclaim agency. Similarly, modern activists balance resilience with advocacy, refusing to accept oppression as inevitable. This approach underscores the importance of aligning resilience with ethical principles, ensuring that it serves as a catalyst for positive change. The intersection of resilience and vulnerability. Resilience is often associated with strength, but it also involves vulnerability, the willingness to confront pain, uncertainty, and fear. This intersection of resilience and vulnerability is central to understanding human experience, particularly in contexts of oppression and resistance. Tibetan history offers numerous examples of this dynamic. Consider the monks who faced persecution under Langdarma. Their resilience was not born of invincibility but of vulnerability, their acknowledgement of suffering and their determination to transcend it. By embracing vulnerability, they tapped into a deeper source of strength, one rooted in authenticity and compassion. Doesn't this remind us that true resilience requires humility and openness? Similarly, modern Tibetan activists embody this balance. They acknowledge the risks they face, arrest, imprisonment, exile, but choose to act anyway, driven by love for their people and land. Their vulnerability makes their courage all the more inspiring, reminding us that resilience is not about avoiding pain but about facing it with grace and purpose. The timeless nature of the struggle for freedom. The struggle for freedom is as old as humanity itself, yet it remains profoundly relevant today. From ancient empires to modern democracies, individuals and communities have fought to reclaim their agency and assert their dignity. The Tibetan saga is part of this larger narrative, offering insights into the universal quest for autonomy and justice. What makes this struggle timeless? Perhaps it is the tension between control and liberation, a tension that defines much of human existence. Oppression seeks to impose order through domination, while liberation strives to create harmony through collaboration. This dialectic drives progress, challenging us to reimagine relationships between individuals, communities, and institutions. Moreover, the struggle for freedom reflects humanity's capacity for both cruelty and compassion. On one hand, we see examples of tyranny and exploitation, on the other, we witness acts of courage and solidarity. This duality reminds us that freedom is not a given but a choice, one that requires vigilance, effort, and sacrifice. As we reflect on the Tibetan experience, we might ask ourselves, what does freedom mean to me? How do I contribute to, or hinder, the pursuit of freedom for others? These questions invite us to engage actively with the world, recognizing our interconnectedness and responsibility to one another. Part 11. The Philosophical Lessons of Tibetan History for Modern Life. The importance of adaptability in a changing world. One of the most enduring lessons of Tibetan history is the importance of adaptability. Whether facing political upheaval, cultural suppression, or environmental degradation, Tibetans have consistently found ways to adapt without losing their essence. This adaptability offers valuable guidance for navigating the uncertainties of modern life. In today's rapidly changing world, adaptability is more crucial than ever. Technological advancements, climate crises, and shifting geopolitical landscapes demand flexibility and innovation. Yet, adaptation does not mean abandoning core values, it means finding new ways to express them. Just as Tibetan artists blend traditional forms with contemporary styles, so too can we integrate timeless principles with modern realities. Adaptability also involves embracing impermanence, the recognition that nothing lasts forever. This principle, central to Buddhist philosophy, encourages us to let go of attachments and focus on what truly matters. By doing so, we cultivate resilience, enabling us to navigate transitions with equanimity and purpose. The value of compassion in overcoming division. Compassion lies at the heart of Tibetan spirituality and serves as a guiding principle for overcoming division. In a world increasingly polarized by ideology, identity, and interest, compassion offers a path toward reconciliation and understanding. It reminds us that beneath surface differences, we share a common humanity. The Tibetan experience demonstrates the transformative power of compassion. During periods of persecution, practitioners invoked compassion not only for themselves but also for their oppressors. This practice challenged cycles of hatred and violence, fostering empathy and healing. Similarly, modern activists prioritize compassion in their advocacy, seeking to build bridges rather than walls. Compassion also extends beyond interpersonal relationships to encompass systemic change. By addressing the root causes of suffering, ignorance, greed, and fear, we can prevent its recurrence. This requires listening, learning, and collaborating across divides. Doesn't this remind us that compassion is not passive but active, a call to action? The role of mindfulness in navigating complexity. Mindfulness, a cornerstone of Tibetan Buddhism, offers practical tools for navigating life's complexities. By cultivating awareness, presence, and non-judgment, mindfulness enables us to respond thoughtfully rather than react impulsively. This skill is invaluable in a world characterized by information overload, distraction, and stress. For Tibetans, mindfulness has served as both a spiritual practice and a survival strategy. During times of persecution, practitioners used meditation to ground themselves, finding clarity amidst chaos. Similarly, modern advocates employ mindfulness to sustain their efforts, preventing burnout and fostering resilience. Mindfulness also promotes ethical decision-making. By observing our thoughts, emotions, and actions without attachment, we gain insight into our motivations and biases. This self-awareness helps us align our behavior with our values, ensuring that our actions reflect integrity and authenticity. Isn't this a lesson we could all apply in our personal and professional lives? The power of community in building resilience. Community plays a pivotal role in building resilience, providing support, resources, and solidarity. The Tibetan experience underscores the importance of collective effort in overcoming adversity. Whether through monastic networks, exile communities, or global advocacy groups, Tibetans have demonstrated that resilience thrives in connection. Modern life often emphasizes individualism, prioritizing personal achievement over communal well-being. While independence is valuable, it should not come at the expense of interdependence. Communities offer safety nets, amplifying individual strengths and mitigating weaknesses. They remind us that no one succeeds alone, that collaboration is key to sustainable success. Building resilient communities requires intentionality and inclusivity. It involves creating spaces where diverse voices are heard, valued, and empowered. It also entails fostering trust, accountability, and reciprocity. As we reflect on the Tibetan saga, we might consider how we can contribute to stronger, more cohesive communities, whether locally or globally. The call to live authentically. Ultimately, the philosophical lessons of Tibetan history invite us to live authentically, to align our actions with our values and pursue lives of meaning and purpose. Authenticity requires courage, honesty, and vulnerability. It challenges us to confront discomfort and embrace uncertainty, trusting that truth will guide us forward. The Tibetan saga exemplifies this call to authenticity. From monks practicing in secret to activists advocating for autonomy, individuals have chosen to live according to their convictions, even at great personal cost. Their examples inspire us to reflect on our own lives. Are we living authentically, or are we conforming to external expectations? How can we honor our inner truths while respecting others' perspectives? Living authentically also involves recognizing our interconnectedness. Our choices affect not only ourselves but also those around us. By acting with integrity and compassion, we contribute to a ripple effect of positive change. This awareness reminds us that authenticity is not selfish but service-oriented, a way of being that benefits all beings. The paradox of power and humility. One of the most profound philosophical lessons from Tibetan history is the paradoxical relationship between power and humility. Throughout their saga, Tibetans have demonstrated that true strength often lies in vulnerability, and real leadership emerges from service rather than domination. This paradox challenges conventional notions of authority, inviting us to rethink how we wield influence in our personal and collective lives. Consider the example of Lalung Pelgyi Dorje. His assassination of Langdarma was not an act of arrogance or self-aggrandizement but one of humility, a recognition that his role was to serve a greater cause, even at great personal risk. Similarly, spiritual leaders like the Dalai Lama embody this principle, using their influence not to dominate but to uplift others. Their humility fosters trust, respect, and collaboration, creating conditions for genuine transformation. In modern contexts, this lesson has profound implications for leadership and governance. Whether in politics, business, or community organizing, effective leaders prioritize empathy, accountability, and inclusivity over control and coercion. They understand that power is not a zero-sum game, it can be shared and multiplied through collaboration. Doesn't this remind us that true leadership is not about wielding authority but about empowering others? The ethics of resistance in everyday life. Resistance is not limited to grand gestures or dramatic acts of defiance, it manifests in everyday choices that challenge injustice and promote equity. The Tibetan experience teaches us that resistance begins with small, intentional actions, acts of kindness, courage, and integrity that ripple outward to create larger waves of change. For instance, consider the monks who preserved sacred texts during Langdarma's reign. Their efforts may have seemed insignificant at the time, but collectively, they ensured the survival of Tibetan Buddhism. Similarly, modern activists engage in seemingly mundane tasks, writing letters, organizing petitions, attending protests, that cumulatively build momentum for systemic reform. These examples underscore the importance of persistence and patience in resistance movements. This perspective invites us to reflect on our own roles in resisting oppression. How do we confront injustice in our daily lives? Do we speak up when we witness discrimination, inequality, or harm? Or do we remain silent, hoping someone else will take action? Each choice shapes the world we inhabit, reminding us that resistance is not just a political act but a moral imperative. The role of ritual in finding meaning. Rituals play a crucial role in grounding individuals and communities, offering structure and meaning in chaotic times. For Tibetans, rituals have served as anchors of resilience, connecting practitioners to their heritage and providing frameworks for navigating adversity. This function of ritual holds valuable insights for modern life, where uncertainty and disconnection often prevail. Whether through meditation, prayer, or ceremonial practices, rituals create spaces for reflection, gratitude, and renewal. They remind us of what truly matters, our relationships, values, and aspirations, and help us stay aligned with these priorities. In the context of Tibetan resistance, rituals also foster solidarity, uniting participants in shared purpose and vision. Modern society could benefit greatly from embracing ritual, not as rigid traditions but as flexible tools for cultivating presence and connection. From mindfulness exercises to family dinners, rituals can anchor us in the present moment, fostering a sense of belonging and continuity. Isn't this especially relevant in an age dominated by distraction and fragmentation? The interplay between tradition and innovation. Tibetan history exemplifies the delicate balance between tradition and innovation, a dynamic interplay that ensures cultural continuity while enabling adaptation to changing circumstances. This balance offers valuable lessons for addressing contemporary challenges, from climate change to technological disruption. Tradition provides stability, grounding us in timeless principles and practices. It connects us to our roots, reminding us of who we are and where we come from. However, clinging too tightly to tradition can stifle growth, preventing us from responding effectively to new realities. Conversely, prioritizing innovation without regard for heritage risks erasing valuable wisdom and identity. The Tibetan experience demonstrates how to navigate this tension. Figures like Padmasambhava integrated Bon elements into Buddhism, enriching the tradition while honoring indigenous practices. Similarly, modern Tibetan artists blend traditional forms with contemporary styles, ensuring that culture remains vibrant and relevant. These examples highlight the importance of respecting the past while embracing the future. As we face global challenges, we might ask ourselves, how can we honor tradition without becoming stagnant? How can we innovate responsibly, ensuring that progress serves humanity rather than exploits it? These questions invite us to approach change with intentionality and care. The universal quest for liberation. At its core, the Tibetan saga reflects the universal quest for liberation, a journey that transcends borders, cultures, and eras. Whether seeking freedom from external oppression or internal suffering, humans share a common aspiration to live fully and authentically. This quest reminds us of our interconnectedness, challenging us to work together toward a more just and compassionate world. Liberation takes many forms: personal, social, ecological, and spiritual. For some, it involves overcoming fear, doubt, or attachment. For others, it entails dismantling systems of inequality, exploitation, or violence. Regardless of its manifestation, liberation requires courage, creativity, and collaboration. It demands that we confront discomfort and embrace uncertainty, trusting that the path forward will reveal itself. The Tibetan experience inspires us to persist in this quest, reminding us that liberation is not a destination but a process. It calls us to remain steadfast in our convictions while remaining open to growth and transformation. As we reflect on this journey, we might consider, what does liberation mean to me? How can I contribute to the liberation of others? These questions guide us toward a shared vision of freedom and fulfillment. Part 12. The timeless relevance of the Langdarma saga in contemporary society. A mirror for modern oppression. The story of King Langdarma and the assassination that ended his reign serves as a mirror reflecting the dynamics of oppression and resistance in contemporary society. While the specifics of the Tibetan saga occurred over a millennium ago, its themes resonate deeply with modern struggles, from authoritarian regimes to systemic inequalities. Langdarma's persecution of Buddhism echoes the tactics employed by oppressive governments today: censorship, suppression of dissent, and attempts to erase cultural identities. Similarly, the resistance led by monks and figures like Lalung Pelgi Dorje parallels the courageous acts of activists worldwide who risk everything to defend human rights and preserve heritage. This parallel underscores the cyclical nature of history, reminding us that the same patterns repeat themselves unless actively disrupted. What can we learn from this repetition? Perhaps that understanding the past is essential for addressing the present. By studying historical examples of oppression and resistance, we gain insight into strategies for combating injustice and fostering liberation. The Langdarma saga challenges us to recognize these patterns in our own contexts and take informed action to break them. The role of symbolism in modern movements. Symbolism plays a powerful role in shaping narratives of resistance, and the Langdarma saga offers rich material for modern movements to draw upon. The assassination of Langdarma, for instance, has been mythologized as a triumph of righteousness over tyranny, a narrative that resonates with contemporary struggles against authoritarianism and corruption. Symbols like Lalung's black horse, the hidden arrow, and the ceremonial bow evoke themes of stealth, precision, and inevitability. These images inspire activists to adopt creative and strategic approaches to resistance, emphasizing the importance of timing, preparation, and execution. Similarly, the concept of terma, hidden treasures waiting to be rediscovered, encourages movements to preserve knowledge and resources for future generations. Modern movements can harness these symbols to galvanize support, amplify messages, and sustain hope. Whether through art, literature, or digital media, symbolism transforms abstract ideals into tangible expressions of resistance. Doesn't this highlight the enduring power of storytelling to shape consciousness and drive change? The intersection of spirituality and activism. The intersection of spirituality and activism is a recurring theme in the Langdarma saga, offering valuable lessons for modern movements. Tibetan resistance was deeply rooted in Buddhist philosophy, which emphasizes compassion, mindfulness, and interconnectedness. These principles guided practitioners in their efforts to resist oppression while maintaining ethical integrity. In contemporary contexts, spirituality continues to inform activism, providing frameworks for addressing systemic issues with empathy and wisdom. Movements inspired by spiritual teachings prioritize healing over hatred, reconciliation over retribution, and collaboration over competition. They recognize that lasting change requires not only structural reforms but also shifts in consciousness. For example, environmental activism often draws on indigenous spiritualities, emphasizing humanity's interconnectedness with nature. Similarly, social justice movements incorporate mindfulness practices to cultivate resilience and prevent burnout. These approaches demonstrate the transformative potential of integrating spirituality into activism, ensuring that resistance remains grounded in love and compassion. The global implications of cultural preservation. Cultural preservation is not just a local concern, it has global implications for diversity, sustainability, and peace. The Tibetan experience highlights the importance of safeguard guiding principles, ensuring that resistance remains grounded in love and compassion. For example, environmental activism often draws on indigenous spiritualities, emphasizing humanity's interconnectedness with nature. Similarly, social justice movements incorporate mindfulness practices to cultivate resilience and prevent burnout. These approaches demonstrate the transformative potential of integrating spirituality into activism, ensuring that resistance remains grounded in love and compassion. The global implications of cultural preservation. Cultural preservation is not just a local concern, it has global implications for diversity, sustainability, and peace. The Tibetan experience highlights the importance of safeguarding endangered traditions, languages, and ecosystems as vital components of humanity's collective heritage. When cultures disappear, we lose unique perspectives, wisdom, and ways of being that enrich the human experience. In today's interconnected world, cultural preservation requires international cooperation and solidarity. Advocacy groups, governments, and individuals must work together to protect marginalized communities and amplify their voices. This effort extends beyond mere conservation. It involves fostering environments where diverse cultures can thrive and contribute to global dialogue. Moreover, cultural preservation intersects with environmental sustainability. Indigenous knowledge systems, such as those practiced by Tibetans, offer invaluable insights into living harmoniously with nature. By honoring these traditions, we not only preserve cultural diversity but also promote ecological resilience. Doesn't this remind us that cultural and environmental preservation are two sides of the same coin? The call to action in a polarized world. The Langdarma saga concludes with a call to action, a reminder that freedom and justice require vigilance, effort, and sacrifice. In a polarized world rife with division and conflict, this message is more urgent than ever. It challenges us to move beyond apathy and complacency, engaging actively with the issues that affect our communities and planet. Each of us has a role to play, whether through advocacy, education, art, or everyday acts of kindness. By standing in solidarity with marginalized groups, amplifying their voices, and advocating for systemic change, we contribute to a movement that transcends borders and embraces the interconnectedness of all beings. Together, we can create a world where diversity is celebrated, freedom is honored, and resilience is nurtured. As we reflect on the legacy of Langdarma and Lalung Pelgi Dorje, let us carry their lessons forward, using them to inspire action and foster hope. After all, the struggle for liberation is not just a historical account, it is a living testament to the indomitable human spirit. The importance of cultural sovereignty in a globalized world. Cultural sovereignty, the right of communities to preserve and express their unique identities, is a cornerstone of human dignity and resilience. The Tibetan experience underscores the critical importance of safeguarding cultural heritage in the face of homogenization, assimilation, and exploitation. As globalization accelerates, the lessons of Langdarma and Lalung Pelgi Dorje become increasingly relevant for future generations navigating this complex terrain. Under Chinese rule, Tibetans have faced immense pressure to abandon their language, traditions, and spiritual practices. Yet, despite these challenges, they have resisted assimilation through creative acts of preservation, from underground schools teaching Tibetan language to digital platforms amplifying indigenous voices. These efforts demonstrate that cultural sovereignty is not just about maintaining the status quo, it involves adapting traditions to ensure their survival in a changing world. For future generations, the Tibetan saga offers a blueprint for asserting cultural sovereignty without isolating oneself from global influences. It reminds us that diversity enriches humanity, fostering innovation, empathy, and resilience. By honoring indigenous knowledge systems, promoting multilingualism, and celebrating pluralism, we can create a world where all cultures thrive. Isn't this a reminder that cultural preservation is not a zero-sum game but a collaborative endeavor? Moreover, cultural sovereignty intersects with other forms of autonomy, political, economic, and ecological. For instance, protecting sacred lands and ecosystems often goes hand in hand with preserving cultural practices tied to those environments. This interconnectedness highlights the need for holistic approaches to advocacy, ensuring that movements for justice address root causes rather than symptoms. The role of technology in amplifying resistance. Technology has revolutionized the way resistance movements operate, offering unprecedented opportunities for visibility, mobilization, and collaboration. The Tibetan experience illustrates how digital tools can amplify marginalized voices, document injustices, and build global solidarity. However, technology also poses risks, surveillance, misinformation, and algorithmic bias, that require vigilance and strategic adaptation. Social media platforms like Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube have enabled Tibetan activists to bypass state-controlled media and reach international audiences directly. Hashtags like #FreeTibet and #SaveTibet have trended worldwide, sparking conversations and galvanizing action. Online petitions, crowdfunding campaigns, and virtual protests empower supporters regardless of geographic location. This democratization of activism ensures that even those far removed from the conflict can participate meaningfully. However, the use of technology requires ethical considerations. Digital surveillance and cyber attacks pose serious threats to activists' safety, forcing them to adopt encryption tools, anonymous browsing methods, and secure communication channels. This cat-and-mouse game highlights the ongoing battle for control over information, a battle that mirrors the larger struggle for freedom itself. Future generations must navigate this double-edged sword responsibly, leveraging technology's potential while mitigating its risks. They must prioritize digital literacy, cybersecurity, and ethical engagement, ensuring that online activism complements offline efforts. Doesn't this remind us that technology is neither inherently good nor bad but a tool whose impact depends on how it is wielded? The interplay between personal and collective liberation. Liberation is both a personal and collective journey, a dynamic interplay between individual growth and communal well-being. The Langdarma saga exemplifies this duality, showing how personal sacrifices contribute to larger movements for change. This interplay challenges us to align our actions with shared values, ensuring that freedom serves humanity rather than exploits it. For instance, consider the monks who practiced Buddhism in secret during Langdarma's reign. Their personal commitment to faith strengthened the collective resilience of Tibetan spirituality, ensuring its survival for future generations. Similarly, modern activists balance individual courage with communal responsibility, refusing to accept oppression as inevitable. This approach underscores the importance of integrating personal integrity with collective purpose. Future generations must embrace this dual focus, recognizing that true liberation requires both self-awareness and social awareness. They must cultivate emotional intelligence, empathy, and accountability, ensuring that their actions reflect authenticity and compassion. Moreover, they must foster supportive networks, recognizing that strength lies in connection rather than isolation. Doesn't this remind us that liberation is not a solitary endeavor but a shared journey, one that demands patience, persistence, and solidarity? The call to live authentically in service of others. Ultimately, the legacy of Langdarma and Lalong Pelgyi Dorje invites us to live authentically, to align our actions with our values and pursue lives of meaning and purpose. Authenticity requires courage, honesty, and vulnerability. It challenges us to confront discomfort and embrace uncertainty, trusting that truth will guide us forward. The Tibetan saga exemplifies this call to authenticity. From monks practicing in secret to activists advocating for autonomy, individuals have chosen to live according to their convictions, even at great personal cost. Their examples inspire us to reflect on our own lives. Are we living authentically, or are we conforming to external expectations? How can we honor our inner truths while respecting others' perspectives? Living authentically also involves recognizing our interconnectedness. Our choices affect not only ourselves but also those around us. By acting with integrity and compassion, we contribute to a ripple effect of positive change. This awareness reminds us that authenticity is not selfish but service-oriented, a way of being that benefits all beings. As we reflect on the Langdarma saga, we might consider, what does authenticity mean to me? How can I live in alignment with my values while contributing to the greater good? These questions guide us toward a life of purpose and fulfillment, reminding us that every small effort contributes to a larger wave of change. Part 14, The Philosophical Dimensions of Freedom and Identity in Tibetan History. Freedom as an existential quest. Freedom is one of humanity's most profound aspirations, yet it remains elusive for many. The Tibetan struggle for autonomy highlights the complexities of this quest, reminding us that freedom is not a singular state but a multifaceted journey. It encompasses personal liberty, cultural sovereignty, political self-determination, and ecological sustainability. At its core, freedom is an existential quest, a search for meaning, purpose, and agency in a chaotic and uncertain world. For Tibetans, this quest has been shaped by centuries of adversity, from Langdarma's persecution to Chinese occupation. Despite these challenges, they have resisted oppression with remarkable determination, drawing strength from their spiritual heritage and cultural identity. The Langdarma saga invites us to reflect on the nature of freedom. What does it mean to be free, not just politically but spiritually and intellectually? True freedom, I believe, lies in the ability to choose one's path while respecting others' rights to do the same. It also involves recognizing interconnectedness. No individual exists in isolation, our choices affect those around us. Therefore, freedom must be tempered with responsibility. We cannot claim liberty for ourselves while denying it to others. Nor can we pursue personal gain at the expense of communal well-being. This balance between autonomy and accountability is delicate yet essential. It requires constant negotiation, humility, and empathy. Perhaps this is the ultimate lesson of the Langdarma saga, that freedom is not a destination but a journey, a continuous effort to align our actions with our values. Identity as a dynamic process. Identity is not static, it is a dynamic process shaped by history, culture, environment, and personal experience. The Tibetan experience demonstrates how identity evolves over time, adapting to changing circumstances while retaining core elements that define a community's essence. For Tibetans, identity is deeply intertwined with spirituality, land, and language. Buddhist philosophy provides a moral compass guiding resistance efforts, emphasizing compassion, wisdom, and interconnectedness. Sacred landscapes serve as anchors of belonging, connecting practitioners to their ancestors and cosmology. Language preserves cultural memory, carrying stories, songs, and teachings across generations. Together, these elements form a cohesive identity that sustains resilience and fosters renewal. However, identity is also fluid, capable of embracing diversity and innovation. Figures like Padmasambhava integrated Bon elements into Buddhism, enriching the tradition while honoring indigenous practices. Similarly, modern Tibetan artists blend traditional forms with contemporary styles, ensuring that culture remains vibrant and relevant. These examples highlight the importance of respecting the past while embracing the future. As we reflect on the Langdarma saga, we might consider, what shapes my identity? How do I navigate tensions between tradition and innovation? These questions invite us to embrace complexity and diversity in our pursuit of truth. The paradox of suffering and growth. Suffering is an inevitable part of life, yet it holds paradoxical potential for growth. The Tibetan experience illustrates this paradox beautifully. Centuries of persecution have inflicted immense pain, yet they have also forged a resilient identity rooted in compassion, wisdom, and perseverance. This duality invites us to reconsider our relationship with suffering. Rather than viewing suffering as purely negative, we might see it as a teacher, a harsh but invaluable guide to understanding ourselves and the world around us. Suffering strips away illusions, revealing truths that comfort often obscures. It forces us to confront vulnerabilities, fostering empathy and humility. And it challenges us to find meaning in chaos, transforming despair into purpose. This perspective aligns with Buddhist teachings on the nature of suffering, dukkha. According to Buddhism, suffering arises from attachment to outcomes, identities, and desires. By letting go of these attachments, we free ourselves from unnecessary suffering and open up space for joy and fulfillment. While this process is difficult, it offers profound rewards, enabling us to live authentically and fully. As we reflect on the Tibetan saga, we might consider, how can I transform suffering into growth? What lessons can I extract from adversity to enrich my life and the lives of others? These questions guide us toward a deeper understanding of the human condition, reminding us that resilience is born not from avoiding storms but from weathering them. The universal appeal of Tibetan wisdom. Tibetan wisdom has captivated audiences worldwide, offering insights into the nature of existence and the path to enlightenment. Its universal appeal lies in its emphasis on compassion, mindfulness, and interconnectedness, values that resonate across cultures and religions. From the Dalai Lama's advocacy for global peace to the popularity of meditation practices like mindfulness and loving kindness, Tibetan Buddhism continues to inspire millions. This global reach underscores the importance of cultural preservation. By safeguarding their spiritual heritage, Tibetans contribute to humanity's collective wisdom, enriching our understanding of what it means to live fully and meaningfully. It also highlights the responsibility we all share to protect endangered traditions and ensure their survival for future generations. As we reflect on the Langdarma saga, we might consider, what wisdom can I draw from Tibetan teachings to enhance my own life? How can I support efforts to preserve cultural heritage and promote diversity? These questions invite us to engage actively with the world, recognizing our interconnectedness and responsibility to one another. The dialectic of oppression and liberation. Oppression and liberation are not static states but dynamic forces engaged in an eternal dialectic, a push-and-pull relationship that shapes societies and individuals alike. This dialectic is evident in the story of Langdarma and Lalung Pelgi Dorje, where the tension between tyranny and freedom drives the narrative forward. But what can we learn from this interplay? How does it manifest in our own lives? At its core, the dialectic reflects the human condition, the perpetual struggle to assert agency in a world that often seeks to constrain us. Oppression arises when power is centralized and wielded without accountability, while liberation emerges when individuals and communities reclaim their autonomy. Yet, these forces are not mutually exclusive, they coexist in a delicate balance. For every act of suppression, there is a counterforce of resistance waiting to emerge. Consider the monks who practiced Buddhism in secret during Langdarma's reign. Their clandestine efforts were not just acts of survival but assertions of identity. By preserving their faith, they resisted the erasure of their cultural heritage. This resistance was not merely reactive, it was proactive, rooted in a vision of renewal. Isn't it remarkable how even in the darkest moments, the seeds of liberation are sown? This dialectic also challenges us to examine our roles in perpetuating or dismantling systems of oppression. Are we complicit in structures that marginalize others, or do we actively work to dismantle them? These questions invite us to reflect on our responsibilities as global citizens, recognizing that freedom is not just a personal aspiration but a collective endeavor. Identity as resistance. For Tibetans, identity has served as both a source of strength and a form of resistance. Under Chinese rule, policies aimed at assimilation have sought to erase Tibetan culture, language, and spirituality. Yet, despite these pressures, Tibetans have resisted homogenization through acts of cultural preservation, from teaching children their native tongue to performing traditional dances and rituals. This resistance highlights the importance of identity as a tool for empowerment. When individuals and communities embrace their heritage, they affirm their agency and dignity. They refuse to be defined solely by external narratives, instead reclaiming their stories and shaping their futures. Doesn't this remind us that identity is not just about belonging to a group but about asserting one's humanity? Moreover, identity as resistance extends beyond cultural preservation to encompass broader social and political dimensions. For instance, environmental activism often intersects with cultural sovereignty, as indigenous communities fight to protect sacred lands and ecosystems. Similarly, movements for linguistic rights challenge dominant languages, ensuring that marginalized voices are heard and valued. These efforts demonstrate that identity is inherently political, a means of resisting erasure and asserting presence. Freedom as a collective endeavor. While freedom is often framed as an individual pursuit, the Tibetan experience underscores its collective dimension. True liberation requires collaboration, solidarity, and shared purpose. It cannot be achieved in isolation but must be nurtured through relationships and community. The Langdarma saga exemplifies this principle. Monks who preserved Buddhist teachings during persecution did so not out of self-interest but out of love for their tradition and community. Similarly, modern activists prioritize collective action, recognizing that systemic change demands unity and coordination. This approach challenges us to move beyond individualism, embracing interdependence as a path to freedom. As we reflect on the Tibetan saga, we might consider, how can I contribute to collective liberation? What actions can I take to support marginalized communities and amplify their voices? These questions guide us toward a vision of freedom that honors diversity and fosters equity. The paradox of power in liberation movements. Power lies at the heart of both oppression and liberation. Those who wield it often do so to maintain dominance, while those who resist seek to redistribute it more equitably. Yet, power itself is paradoxical. It can corrupt or uplift, destroy or create, depending on how it is used. Consider Langdarma's use of power. By targeting Buddhist monasteries, he aimed to centralize authority and eliminate threats to his rule. But in doing so, he alienated large segments of the population, undermining his own legitimacy. Conversely, Lalung's act of defiance demonstrates the subversive potential of power when wielded ethically. Though he employed violence, his intent was to protect a cherished way of life, restoring balance to a fractured society. This duality invites us to reflect on our relationship with power. Do we hoard it selfishly or share it generously? Do we use it to dominate or to empower? These choices define not only our character but also the legacy we leave behind. The role of hope in sustaining resistance. Hope is the fuel that powers liberation movements. Without it, resistance becomes futile, and despair takes hold. The monks who practiced Buddhism in secret during Langdarma's reign embodied this hope. Despite facing persecution, they believed in a better future, a time when their faith could flourish openly again. Hope is not blind optimism, it is grounded in possibility. It acknowledges difficulties while affirming the potential for change. As Václav Havel famously wrote, hope is not the conviction that something will turn out well, but the certainty that something makes sense, regardless of how it turns out. This perspective sustains activists, artists, and dreamers alike, reminding them that every small action contributes to a larger purpose. In today's world, where challenges seem insurmountable, hope remains vital. Whether combating climate change, fighting for human rights, or preserving cultural heritage, we must cultivate hope, not as a passive wish but as an active commitment to creating the world we envision. Part 15, A Vision for the Future Inspired by Tibetan Resilience. A Blueprint for Global Solidarity. The Tibetan Saga offers a blueprint for global solidarity, a call to stand together in the face of injustice and work collectively toward liberation. It reminds us that no struggle exists in isolation. All forms of oppression are interconnected, demanding holistic solutions that address root causes rather than symptoms. Global solidarity requires empathy, humility, and reciprocity. It involves listening to marginalized voices, honoring their leadership, and amplifying their messages. It also entails fostering trust, accountability, and collaboration, ensuring that relationships are grounded in mutual respect and understanding. Doesn't this remind us that solidarity is not charity but partnership, a shared journey toward justice and peace? As we reflect on the Langdarma saga, we might consider, how can I build bridges across divides? What actions can I take to foster inclusivity and equity? These questions guide us toward a vision of solidarity that transcends borders and embraces the interconnectedness of all beings. The importance of cultural preservation. Cultural preservation is essential for fostering diversity, resilience, and innovation. The Tibetan experience underscores the critical importance of safeguarding endangered traditions, languages, and ecosystems as vital components of humanity's collective heritage. When cultures disappear, we lose unique perspectives, wisdom, and ways of being that enrich the human experience. Future generations must prioritize cultural preservation, recognizing that diversity strengthens humanity. They must advocate for policies that protect indigenous knowledge systems, promote multilingualism, and celebrate pluralism. Moreover, they must integrate traditional practices with modern innovations, ensuring that solutions are culturally sensitive and ecologically sound. Isn't this a reminder that cultural preservation is not nostalgia but necessity? The call to live authentically and compassionately. Ultimately, the legacy of Langdarma and Lalong Pelgi Dorje invites us to live authentically and compassionately, to align our actions with our values and pursue lives of meaning and purpose. Authenticity requires courage, honesty, and vulnerability. It challenges us to confront discomfort and embrace uncertainty, trusting that truth will guide us forward. Compassion, meanwhile, serves as a guiding principle for overcoming division. In a world increasingly polarized by ideology, identity, and interest, compassion offers a path toward reconciliation and understanding. It reminds us that beneath surface differences, we share a common humanity. As we reflect on the Tibetan saga, we might consider, how can I live authentically and compassionately in service of others? What actions can I take to honor my inner truths while contributing to the greater good? These questions guide us toward a life of purpose and fulfillment, reminding us that every small effort contributes to a larger wave of change. A vision of liberation for all beings. The Langdarma saga concludes with a vision of liberation for all beings, a world where diversity is celebrated, freedom is honored, and resilience is nurtured. This vision challenges us to move beyond apathy and complacency, engaging actively with the issues that affect our communities and planet. Each of us has a role to play, whether through advocacy, education, art, or everyday acts of kindness. By standing in solidarity with marginalized groups, amplifying their voices, and advocating for systemic change, we contribute to a movement that transcends borders and embraces the interconnectedness of all beings. Together, we can create a world where all cultures thrive, all voices are heard, and all lives matter. As we carry forward the lessons of Langdarma and Lalong Pelgi Dorje, let us remain steadfast in our convictions while remaining open to growth and transformation. After all, the struggle for liberation is not just a historical account, it is a living testament to the indomitable human spirit.